At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, our goal is to help you, your families, and your businesses grow and prosper for generations. We take pride in our community, whether it's volunteering our time or helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We provide you with the personal service and attention you deserve. With over 220 years of banking experience, decisions are made locally. We are Council Bluffs people operating at Council Bluffs Bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Council Bluffs Savings Bank, hometown banking, the way it used to be. Member FDIC.
Okay, we'll call the study session to order and start with the reviewing the agenda. Anything on the consent agenda that anyone would like to discuss?
Just with respect to item 4C, vacating some property, it appears as though that we're trying to make property here more commercially viable, since this is in the mid-city district that we're looking to get developed. So the thinking here is that by opening up these areas, or by vacating that portion of the lots, that these become more valuable for development. I mean,
I don't know that I would say it's for commercial development. I think that's one of the things that we will be looking at in the mid-city plan. But we do own all the property on either side of them.
Yeah.
There's really no purpose for them other than reserving easements for utilities. And at some point in time, we feel that we are going to dispose or develop them in larger tracts.
Yeah, and they appear to be totally undeveloped now, so.
They are.
Yeah. I asked because a few months back, there's a request made by Decker Plastics to vacate part of South First, which dead ends out and doesn't appear to be maintained very well. But might there be a prospect then of reconsidering that project, given the fact that we're trying to enhance the development ability of this area?
Well, the challenge with that is there was more utilities within that alley and street, and that there was other properties, private properties, that would be restricted to one way to their properties. If we could resolve that, it's probably a candidate for that. But at the present time, no.
Okay. In speaking with Mr. Decker, it sounded like something that could be resolved. It's just that they didn't adequately communicate that.
Well, I talked
in
with him
advance.
maybe about a month ago, and he said he was going to show me some of his layouts, and maybe there was a solution, but for vacating.
Okay.
So, but I haven't seen those plans from him.
He does have room in the back.
Right.
In the street, and I talked to the contractor, not Mr. Decker, thought that the utilities were to one side of the street, but I don't know.
Anyway, I applaud the effort to take pieces of city property down there that we're not really using and make those available. So I'll get with the folks later on and see if maybe we can't do something that would enhance Mr. Decker's ability to increase his business.
Well, like I said, I mean, he said he had a development concept of how he was going to figure out a way to have a loading or an unloading dock, and I have not seen him.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Other consent agenda items?
On 4E,
You have a note that's.
oh, it's deleted. I'll save my question till next time. Never mind. 4F, of the 11 lots, it wasn't clear to me in the write-up how many were single and how many were multi.
10 and 2.
10 and 2. 10 and 2 equals 12, but there's 11 lots. 10 and 2 equals 12, but there's 11 lots.
Thanks for pointing out that.
Or else I can't add.
Currently, there are 11 lots, 9 single-family, 2 multifamily. But one of the recommendations is, in the packet, you've got a layout, which isn't necessarily going to be the layout in the end. There's no guarantee of that. We have suggested that they take the 2 lots that they have for multifamily, include them as one. So in the end, it'd be 10 lots.
Okay,
1 multifamily lot and 9 single-family.
great, thank you.
Other consent agenda item questions?
Dick, I sent you an email very late in the day. I didn't know if you had a chance to take a look at 4G. I had a question. Oh, no, that's fine. I understand one of the homeowners, I remember in the write-up, the house, I think it's on North First, hadn't responded, and I have some additional information. And long and short of it is, today's action, do I have it right that it wouldn't preclude them if they decided to be a part of this, they still could? It doesn't close today?
That is correct.
Okay, that's just what the question was. Okay, thanks.
You know, and somewhat related to Oro, I was talking to Lynn on the phone earlier and was relaying some information Art gave us, and since everybody's tax statement came out, and I wasn't doing it justice. Art, can you kind of update the council on the information that you talked about in relation to our property tax statement that just came out? So many people think that their property taxes go solely to the city of Council Bluffs, and nothing could be further from the truth, and so.
I received my property tax bill this weekend, and I should point out that I live in Lewis Central School District, but within the city of Council Bluffs, so I'm only speaking for that group of people. And when I got it, my taxes went up $400, or about 8%. And my first thought was, well, Dale lowered taxes down in his district, Lewis Central, and we kept ours the same. How are my taxes going up almost 8%? And I looked at it, and our tax statements show the amount of tax dollars that the various entities are taking in. And the Lewis Central School District, City of Council Bluffs, Iowa West Community College, Pottawatomie County Urban Levy, the Assessor's Office, and the Ag Extension, and one other minor agency, a year ago took in $90.8 million. For this upcoming tax year, those same entities are asking for $99.1 million. So they're saying we need $8.3 million more to operate. And I started to look of that $8.3 million, who's asking for it? Who's going to get it? And the community college is asking for $1.9 million more. They're in a sense saying take us from 8.1 to $10 million, a 23% increase. Combine Lewis Central School District, City of Council Bluffs, Assessor, Ag Extension are only asking for $400,000 more than they did a year ago, or less than a 1% increase. And the remaining $6.9 million, or I'm sorry, $6 million is going to the county. They're raising their taxes 19.7%. So our government, our whole entity is asking for $8.3 million more next year in taxes. City of Council Bluffs by itself is only asking for $200,000 more. The bulk of it is county and Iowa West Community College. So,
Art, is that about a 0.5% increase in what we're asking for?
yeah, exactly, 0.54.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're basically operating on the same dollars we did last year. A couple of the other agencies are, some are not.
And inflation's running, what, 1.7?
That's just under 2.
Okay. So
Has been the last couple of years. You know, it caused me to go back and look at what's happened over the last 8 years in tax rates. And I realize every group has their own special needs and that sort of thing, but we do operate in the same economy here with the same basic property assessments. That doesn't change for us. And over the last 8 years, the city tax rate, total tax levy, has gone down 2.4%. 8 years ago, it was $18.19, and now it's $17.75. I looked at the county-wide levy, just a portion of it that includes general basic, general supplemental, county services, and debt service. And in that same period of time, when ours went down 2.4%, theirs has gone up 29%, from 692 to 892 over that period of time.
You're talking about the county?
County, yeah.
Just the county?
This, the county-wide levy, which affects us urban taxpayers.
Wow.
They've gone up, that part of the levy's gone up 29%. Here's what's interesting, the rural basic levy, that part of the levy over 8 years has gone up 1%. That's not 1% per year, that's 1% over 8 years. 8 years ago it was 329.6 and now it's 333, so it's basically gone up 3 cents or 1%.
Basically, what that pays for is the services that residents of the county that don't live in the city receive is what it's supposed to go for, but we've progressively seen an intentional shift from those people paying for their services to the general levy that everybody pays, including the city of Council Bluffs.
Art, is it possible, and I don't expect you to do it off the top of your head, I'd like to know, I seem to recall that the citizens of Council Bluffs are about 70% or thereabouts of the population of the county.
62,000 out of 92,000,
Sure.
so just a little over 2/3.
All right. And at that point, I'd be curious to know what percentage, if it can be boiled down to one number, the burden they're carrying. Presumably it's higher than 2/3 based on the numbers you just gave me.
Yeah, that's
At some point, I'd just like to know what that number would be if it can be determined.
if I can figure that out, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I told Art this morning that that county supervisor earlier in the year had said that that they have to pay higher expense for public safety because of crime in Council Bluffs, and I know that in that general levy, 1.2 million of the $1.4 million cost for sheriff's patrol. These are sheriff's officers that patrol the county, don't patrol in the city. Annual cost 1.2 million is paid out of the general fund, and so we pay 2/3 of the cost of the sheriff to patrol the county. And nobody in the county pays for the police to patrol the city. So that's one misnomer about the.
Right. Yeah, I think the most important thing, was the first thing you said, is that individuals will see that the property tax values, that the property tax that they're being charged in the upcoming year is going up, and the tendency will be to say, I live in the city, what are those guys doing with it? But it's really important to know that in the area that taxing district I'm in, it's going up $8.3 million. But only 200,000 of that's going to the city. $8.1 million is going to others, and that other than us. So the lion's share is of the property tax increase is not going to the city of Council Bluffs.
Art, are you going to be here tonight? it would be really nice if you could do this again tonight, because I know a lot of people don't get an opportunity to watch study session, but they do get an opportunity to watch the council meetings, and I'd really like the public to be aware of that. It may at least help clarify it for those that watch.
Sure, I can be here.
That would be
That'd
great.
be really good.
Yeah, 'cause
Thank
we get questions every year. They just, you're right, they just assume that the city is raising their taxes, and we're really trying to stay in budget and not do that, but there's
Well-
multiple agency impacts.
Well, there's some discretion, it's interesting, I won't say discretionary funds, but some funds that can move. Both the county and the city on our general fund have a constraint. And for the city, the constraint is $8.10 on the general fund levy plus 27 cents. It's called emergency fund, but really you might as well call it supplemental fund to the general levy. We've been at $8.37 forever. If you separate that tax out by itself, you know, we've gone up 0. If you look at the county's general basic levy, that's gone up 0. They're capped at $3.50. But then it's the other variable components, and if you start to split them out by comparables, debt service is debt service no matter where you look. It's principal and interest payments and the cost of financing. Well, we're in an environment where interest rates have gone down over the last 8 years. So the only other variable that's really hitting on the amount your debt service levy is, do you have more borrowing or less borrowing? So just naturally, with where interest rates have gone over the last few years, you would expect a decrease. Our debt service levy has gone down 28% in that period of time. The county's has gone up 128%. You know, so that's been part of the reason they're going up, we're going down. So then you have to ask yourself the question: if debt service is going up, what are we borrowing for? I can speak to the city for that. I can't speak to the county. You know, we took an approach about 6 or 7 years ago where we said, you know, we're only going to borrow for capital items where the lives are longer than the debt itself. In a sense, we said to ourselves, we're not going to make car payments by getting a 20-year mortgage. We've stuck to that. I don't know that others have, but that's another component why our debt service has gone down. The other levy that's interesting, there's some variable expenses which are allowed to rise based on what the costs are. For a city, it's things like benefit payments, retirement, insurance, and that sort of thing. The airport levy is capped at 27 cents. Transit isn't capped, but we've kind of imposed a cap on ourselves of in the 30s. The sum of those 3 levies over the last 8 years has only risen 0.9%. A comparable levy, I'm not going to say for certain because I don't know enough about it, but comparably there's the general supplemental that the county has. In 8 years, that's gone up 84%. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but what I am saying is it has gone up. The question would be, what are the services that are being provided for that? The one area where we have taken a hit, and I isolated it, was a tort and liability levy. Our current rate is 76% higher than it was 8 years ago. Well, you know the reason for that, so we don't need to go into that one again. But on all the others where we were operating within the constraints of the local economy and what taxpayers are telling you that you're willing to spend, we've kept it in some areas at no increase. Some areas increase is much less than inflation and have lowered the overall tax levy. So yes, I'll be here tonight, and if you've got other questions, please ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Thanks.
Really appreciate
It
that.
would be very helpful. There are a lot of comments, particularly on local media from a lot of, well-meaning and understanding folks who just, it would be helpful for them to know a little bit more information about what you just talked about, because there are a lot of misconceptions about it. It'd be best to be accurate.
Any other consent agenda items?
I have a bunch of questions on H, so I don't know if it's better to wait until next meeting. We're just setting this for public hearing.
On which one?
H. Urban renewal.
Well, I guess I'd ask them now, and then you'll have time to think about them and maybe have different questions next time.
Okay. Okay, so for this cold storage facility, I'm just wondering, I saw that there was going to be a traffic study, because I was wondering what the impact of the bigger trucks would be. Also, am curious on the taxable value now versus the future value. And what exactly is the building height? Have two other questions, but I don't understand them, so I'm gonna have to reread the text. But that'll give you 3 to start on, whoever wants
I,
to.
you,
I'm having trouble pulling up my download, so I can't even read. Is yours up?
If any worked, but yeah.
Maybe the internet's slow.
We've met with them as far as staff. Not sure about a traffic study yet. We've asked for traffic numbers,
Okay,
volumes, so Public Works can kind of ascertain that. I think also we're waiting for kind of the layout, see how it interfaces with Veterans Highway and 24th Street. What's your second question?
height?
the height, the building height, it talked about that.
I don't know yet. I think they're looking at 90 feet, I believe.
How much over the max is that?
15?
15 feet?
Yeah. They will be looking at submitting a text amendment similar to what we did recently with Google.
Okay,
Had to be on 50-acre parcels, and so that's the difference there.
right, okay. And then do we have any idea what the tax value now and in the future will be? Or is it too?
I would say the tax value now is, quite frankly, very minimal because it's agriculturally assessed.
Right,
To my understanding, they're proposing to build a $27 million facility, so that's what our projections are based on.
okay.
Most of half, they're also talking about another 27 million in equipment, which is non-taxable, to my understanding.
And one of the, to me, interesting nuances were that while there is real tax value there is not a huge number of jobs, but a significant number of jobs. All of, I think the lowest pays maybe $15 an hour, so pretty good paying jobs. And what was it, Michael, 60 or?
Alex Bauer for that free on the mayor. I'm Mike Dellinger with Advanced Southwest Iowa Corporation, and we've been working with Project Hightower since March, and have visited with the city a couple times in confidence with regard to the company's interest. As Mr. Gross mentioned, it's a $27 million initial phase, about 185,000 square foot building. The height actually could be varied from 90 up to about 110 feet in portions of it.
Okay.
It's still being engineered, and the engineering is based upon this site's ability to hold a large building such as this building would be. A very large footprint, very heavy and tall building. About 50 jobs in the initial phase. Payroll annual is 2.5 million, so the jobs average 50,000 a year without fringe. Actually, I believe that the starting pickers, the unskilled jobs in this automated warehouse would be in the range of about $18 an hour to start, so a little bit above the state's requirements. And we anticipate that there will be probably double this number of jobs, although the company's not ready to commit to 100 new jobs yet based upon the market. They anticipate future growth. What we have found is this. It's not just the 50 jobs at this building, but the benefit will be to Council Bluffs and to the Omaha region, where our primary food processors, our primary employers, will have an opportunity to reduce their on-site footprint for cold storage and warehousing, and they can use that footprint for additional production in the future, which means greater financial opportunity for Council Bluffs. So what we're doing is we're working within the supply chain that's been identified as a need to support these existing companies, and working with this third-party logistics company to help come in and meet that need. Well, it was suggested to me that perhaps companies that are currently in the community might come and speak or give a letter in support of this project. Frankly, they won't. Typically in private business, they're not going to commit themselves to something until that something is there because they have their own strategic and competitive issues at hand. But we're pretty confident that this company is working on its contracts now to secure this. The key is this. We have lured this company to Council Bluffs based upon our energy and our excitement and our interest in getting them here in our supply chain. Our problem has been finding a site to accommodate this company. The number of sites that we've seen, we keep coming back to this northwest corner of 24th Street, South 24th and Veterans, and we keep impressing upon the company that that would be a good location for them. The problem that we face is that this site is will have a considerable cost basically for development. To put a building there, really any building there, the soil there is not very compactable. It's not a good soil for construction. It's poorly drained. And for a building of this stature, it means we're going to have to remove a lot of those soils and bring in new soils, compact them over the winter to allow for a settling and that sort of thing. But this will be a building, for example, that have over 3 feet of insulation underneath it because of the cold storage capacity. And again, only 50 employees. It will be a robotics, highly automated company. So we think it will be a good addition to our supply chain in helping our primary employers.
And if you're concerned about users, it would be a safe assumption that banks aren't going to finance without some contracts in place. So.
That's true, again, because we're asking this company to take on a considerable risk by developing a site that most would say is undevelopable.
I figured out my other questions as you were talking, because I still can't download the packet, but when do you anticipate they'll make the decision, and how many sites remain in the running besides Council Bluffs?
We're their primary site of consideration. We're the site that they are solely focused on now, but they have looked at other sites on the Nebraska side of the Omaha region, over in Sarpy County and others. They keep coming back to us. Every site has some sort of imperfection. Frankly, this site would be more costly for them to develop than others, but as an example, a key restrictor over in Nebraska is in Sarpy County. Their height restrictions on their buildings as well. And the difference is that in their negotiations in Nebraska, Sarpy County has shown less of a willingness to accommodate the height than what we have through our marketing and sales process. We've taken more of an approach that what can we do to help business get it done in Council Bluffs, because we're open for business.
Mike, when this finally all comes together, if it comes together, the site that they're buying is larger than what they'll be using. So I'm assuming they're going to then sell off some of that site. How does that figure into the whole benefit package? Because I don't think that we would want to incent them on land they're going to turn around and sell. Will that be kind of pulled out of the equation? How's that going to work?
Well, that's a very good question, Sharon. I have a drawing here that I think will help just show the perimeters of the area that's under consideration. Let me see if I got enough, 2, 4, 6. And this shows the proposed or anticipated urban renewal area. Lynn, if I may give those to you. And there will be outlots in the proposal along South 24th Street, the frontage there. The idea being that that could be developed for some sort of a small commercial flex relative to this development or the 24 veterans area. We anticipate with 50 employees over a 20-hour period each day, there will be roughly 100 trucks in and out at peak. That means 200 truck trips a day. Nothing really to be concerned about in the essence of both of these these roadways have been designed for that type of growth. But we do anticipate having the outlots along South 24th Street. In our discussions with the company and with the city staff, we looked at the opportunity to include that in the tax increment district, because that would help to repay the tax increment that much sooner. I would anticipate that what we're doing in this instance is the Growth Alliance, Council Bluffs Growth Alliance, is working with the landowners to prepare an option agreement. So what we're hoping is the Growth Alliance will be able to option this ground so we can continue to do our due diligence. That will help us understand where the building footprint should be. We anticipate it being back to the northwest area of this site, away from the road frontages, so that it diminishes the height, with the outlots being developed out front in a way that should give it some architectural clarity. So though we do anticipate, Sharon, that those will be designed for sale, it might well be that the developer, the current owner, retains them for retail development. It's not in Project Hightower's interest to be the owner-developer of it. They just do cold storage for a living. But I expect that we'll have that answer as we go through the process of the tax increment and the urban renewal proposal. And also, to your question, Councilor Brannigan, the company has asked us to fast-track this. That's why we still have some of these questions unanswered. We basically wanted to introduce this to get the official conversation going, because we have had visits behind the scenes with the city and with the state of Iowa, which has made an initial projection as to its participation. The state has invited us to do a full application for assistance, and we're going to try and get that done so that it's on their schedule for September 15th, so that by their September or October state meetings with IDA, we would have answers then. The company would like, if all this works out well, to be on the site in November, beginning the process of the soil work that they need to do. So it can be done through the winter in preparation for 2014 construction and then mid-2015 occupancy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, mid-2016 occupancy. I'm a year behind myself.
Fast track.
I'm only 40. It is, and here's the key. This is typically how it works in what we do in our world. This company's been working on this project for 6 years in Omaha. We were introduced to it 6 months ago. And now, because of the market conditions, they're asking us, how can we be as expedient as possible based upon our opportunity to do in this market what we anticipate doing. And again, companies will come to this resource once it's here. It's hard for them to commit to something they can't see. But when they see 185,000 square feet of cold storage space over there, and the company will execute this project when roughly 67% of the building's filled. So I think it tells you that it's pretty close now because they've asked us to fast track. But companies, when they see this logistics center, will use it as their advantage. Companies like Tyson or ConAgro or others that are in the region that could easily use cold storage space and then not have to use their space for that type of execution.
I don't think Iowa's gonna take 6 years. Nebraska's taken 6 years already?
The company has been looking in the region for 6 years with their potential customers.
Okay.
Again, because one of the interesting things about this concept is we're going vertical instead of horizontal.
Okay.
And you'll see more of this in third-party logistics, going up instead of out to save ground space and save cost. And I anticipate actually, this was originally, we were looking at about 230,000 square feet. They pared it down by 50 to the 185,000 based upon one of their prospects. Well, again, the concern, the delay on executing because they want the building to be in place before they make that type of a capital scale plan or capital plan scale. So I anticipate that you'll see these companies in our area looking at this as an opportunity for them to reduce their third-party costs.
And it's not that Nebraska's been that slow to respond.
No, it's just the market.
They've been lining up customers.
They've just been out here.
Okay.
It's an
Gotcha.
East Coast company, and they've been out. They recently opened a facility in Houston at the Port of Houston. They have East Coast facilities as well. And based upon the strength of the food processing industry here, obviously, they're looking at how they can become a player and service this
Okay.
market.
So they're developing their customer base first and then
Yes.
the product second?
Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
You next?
Any more to add?
This resolution just basically is a resolution of intent based upon the finding of economic development for staff to go ahead and have a series of meetings, consultations, prepare a plan for essentially the area identified in that map. The urban renewal plan is required by statute to be adopted before we can adopt a tax increment financing ordinance, which actually establishes the district, okay? My current line of thinking would be that once we know the legal description, I'm hoping we will have a legal description of what this project is prior to that you will adopt a TIF district, not for the entire legal description of the urban renewal district, but this project solely. Part of the reason is we're capped at 20 years on an economic development district. If you factor in the lag of taxes of 18 months, it's really 18 and a half years. In a blink of an eye, 5, 6, 7 years go by, then you have a prospect on the corner. Well, you used 6 years. So it's probably wise to wait until such time to create another district on that if it is even necessary.
And when you say on that, you mean on what would be the outlots?
What would be left?
What would be left that they
Yes.
aren't going to utilize in their facility of that
Yes.
12 point whatever acres?
Yeah.
I would be a lot more open to that than having that.
And my guess is and I'll let them speak, I think they're here, and their engineers are here, but, until they do all their civil work with especially stormwater management, finalizing, the lot structure, probably isn't possible until that's done.
Sounds good.
Compliments to both you, Don, and you as well, Mike. This is a complicated, long-term thing that this has to be carefully timed out, and glad to see that you all are thinking through this well in advance and you're putting this much thought and work into it. So, again, kudos.
I would point out as well, Terry Bailey and Bob Monk from the Growth Alliance, being our local economic development office, have been extremely helpful to us on this process as well.
Always great to see a team effort.
Other questions on the consent agenda? Public record or public record? Yeah, public hearings.
On 4B, I seem to recall there was some discussion last time, I think Sharon may have raised it, regarding a question whether the assessed value truly reflects current market value. And I'm sorry, I forgot to note if a number was mentioned as to what may be a more accurate reflection.
No, and I brought down some comps that I had been pulling. You know, the thing is, and I still haven't had a chance to actually drive down there, but Russ says that there's still a garage shed on site that'll have to be removed. I think Don indicated there was some tree work that would have to be done, so it's not, you know, there's some differential there to take care of those items that you would lower it by. And I didn't bring the copies of what I gave you. Oh, you didn't either? Okay, well, what I can say is it's about, it just depends on where it's at as to, this isn't actually quite a large site. The thing about it is it still only accommodates one dwelling. So, you know, you're not gonna, you'll get a little bit more for that house because it's large, but not that much more. So, you know, I don't know if,
At a minimum, I'd like to see the city costs covered. We've got over 16,000.
Which
And
would
on
be a
this one, you
reduction
might-
by a fifth.
yeah, and on this one, you might be able to do that because,
Yeah.
you know, I got to looking and, you know, they're paying anywhere from 15, which seems to be in the west end, what they're paying for a vacant lot. You know, he's gonna have some cost to get the old garage off there in the trees, so I was fine with the offer. Have we had any other offers on this? How long have we had it? Do you know?
I don't think we've had it very long.
Okay, good, all right.
But no, we have not had any other offers.
Is he amenable to the price that you came back with?
I haven't spoken with him. I mean, I looked at it, I drove by it, and here are some costs that probably are realistic to think of. Before anybody builds it, they probably should survey it. Determine where their property lines are. There's a 200 square foot shed. Not sure it has a permanent foundation on it, but it appears that it may have. Several dead trees, nothing of large size, but they're still dead and need to be cut down. There's quite a few hangers on the east side that would have to be dealt with, trees hanging over. And he probably needs some fill where the house is, so.
I'm sorry, you were saying lots were going for about 15 in that
Well,
area.
the ones I pulled, and that's why I forgot to bring, I didn't make copies before I gave them to you, anywhere from 15 to 20, but some of the ones that are running for 20 are on the east end of town. The west end of town, what I'm pulling is, but they're smaller lots, because these size lots don't come up very often, but this is a narrow, long, deep
Longer
lot. It doesn't have a lot more utility other than you get a big backyard. So, I guess I was comfortable with that, you know, anywhere from 12 to 15 would be reasonable, but, you know, depending on what some of these costs would add up to, if you said 15 is the going rate for a lot down there, you take off his costs for making it buildable, I don't think that's out of the question. And again, I don't think we should necessarily be under any expectation that we are ever going to recover the city's costs on many of these.
It's not expected, but it's
see it
wishful
happening.
thinking.
Well, it is. It's
Yeah.
just, and this is one you're gonna get closer than you're gonna get on a lot of other
Right.
ones we deal with.
I would hate to offer 20 and have us sitting on it just over this 5,000 or whatever it is because, yeah, I thought 20,000 seemed high for that, but if you're saying that too, then
He
I
actually-
felt
Other
like it
excuses
was.
than-
He actually gave me his costs, and I don't know if I retained them or not, because he was doing that in,
in his offer, and he put it like as part of his offer.
well, he was on the phone, and I was on the phone, and he threw it on my desk, and I assumed that it went to Brenda, but
And you have to remember, anything he
I'll look
builds,
and see if I can find it.
Yeah.
anything he builds there is gonna be a new home in an older existing neighborhood. It's only gonna go for so much, you know,
Right.
it's got what's around it is gonna affect that. So, you know, whatever he has to give out for that lot on the front end, it's gonna come out of the,
Well, whatever price it is, I mean, I mentioned this last time, I would like
Here.
to see it actually in the resolution, because right now there's nothing in there. So I think it needs to be,
His costs, as he outlined them, were about 15,000, but
To get the lot ready to
I'm
build.
sure there was,
he's not here.
I was just trying to say, I don't think so.
oh, to purchase lot and get it ready, he would have a $15,000.
no,
total
I
cost.
think he was saying to get it ready. I'll have to dig it out.
Maybe there's more site work than.
I'll see if I can
Seems a
find it
bit,
before.
If you
that's
find
I
it,
wonder what
but-
he's
I'm sure that's
including
a
in
little.
I just, it's time
Oh,
for
that's
us to
what I
start
think it
unloading.
was- that was
I,
it.
I'm comfortable with the offer of 12.
Yeah,
I'm fine with 12.
particularly
I'm fine with
based
going
on
up
the
a little bit more, but
discussion
20
of
just
market
seems-
conditions, and I don't like owning real estate.
I don't either. Like I say, I think that value is somewhere between that 12 and 15, but with
Right.
the site costs, I don't know what those are gonna be for him, so
I'd be fine
I'm
with
not
12.
uncomfortable.
Just change it back to 12 instead of the 20.
Both the neighbors and the city is going to be better off if that's developed over the long run, so.
Absolutely. It's
Absolutely.
just time to start getting these off our books, and it's of no value to us.
Yeah,
And, you
I'd
know,
rather see a house on it.
and I realize, you know, we're under obligation to sell it for market value, but, you know, are you gonna, for the money involved, how do you go and get an appraisal done on a vacant lot? You spend, you know, $350, $400 to do that, and then your cost of selling it. I don't think it seems unreasonable.
It's a fair analysis.
I'm fine with that.
All right,
So
anything
do we
else
just
on
change that?
public hearings? How about the ordinances?
On 6A, I was curious if there was any references to, I note it's not often that the planning commission necessarily disagrees with the staff recommendation, and I must confess that I find the staff recommendation particularly compelling, so I wondered if there was some discussion that I'm quite frankly just missing a main point that gave them some
I think
concerns.
their legal representations here.
I think I talked,
Yeah, I was just, something must have come up, I presume, since they voted to.
Well, I think
recommend
it
denial.
just, it's evidence that there was a true split on the commission. I mean, there was a motion to approve, which failed to pass. There was a motion to deny, that failed to pass. There was a third alternative that would say, well, let's rezone what they're showing they want to develop, and we'll leave the rest by Veterans Highway, west of the church, as it's currently zoned, and that didn't get anywhere either, so.
And I was
There was some concerns expressed from neighbors.
Two budding property owners
yeah.
spoke. One was Bob Atkins, he was concerned about drainage in the
Yeah.
area. The other was the one who owns the house immediately to the west of
Yeah.
a large
Chuck,
parcel.
Is that the Charles?
Yeah.
Because in the write-up, it says he didn't state whether he was for or against, but at the bottom, it said he appeared against.
He spoke out against, he was
Okay.
concerned about dust and whatever from the operation.
You know, and I think there was perhaps some concern with the intensity of the industrial use, as opposed to it being industrial, you know?
Well, that area's not going to be residential.
No, don't get me wrong what I'm saying there.
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
saying,
no, I'm just speaking to the
you know,
generality.
it
of it.
is, you have those industrial uses that have more traffic, might have a little bit more noise. It's not a, you know, building where everything's going on inside, you know?
But it'll be across the street from the recycling center, if I read the map correctly, where certainly lots of things going outside there.
Agreed?
So I just have a hard time seeing the problem. And to just do half the property just doesn't seem to make it viable to buy a property. I can't imagine the seller wants to keep half of it, and I can't imagine the buyer would want to keep half of it agricultural too. Especially since that half, I think, is going to be fronting onto Veterans Memorial, which surely, based on all the other uses in the area, it's not going to be agricultural, it's certainly not going to be residential. It's going to be this sort of thing, I would think.
Should be a pretty attractive parcel.
Yeah, and I can't imagine why, I can understand the neighbors' concerns, but that area has trended towards this for decades, and so I don't see it as a surprise.
So to clarify, Don, on we're rezoning not the whole property, just the one bit,
No, we're rezoning the whole property.
everything, to I-2 or I-1?
I-2.
There was a lot
one of the motions was to rezone part of it, but that didn't go
That's,
through
yeah,
either.
that's what
Yeah.
confused
I don't
me, it
think
was,
that
so,
makes
but this is actually to rezone all of it, and then so the 2030 plan was also mentioned that it designates, but it didn't say I-2 or I-1, but it designates I-2?
Well, there's a certain degree of discretion. You can't answer every question in
Right.
this global document, but we can say with the South Point, with the recycling center, we feel that Gifford Road is, you know, an industrial area. The area to the south, probably it leans towards industrial development. In fact, the Industrial Foundation has looked at various scenarios in that area. There's probably about 200 acres to the south. That could be developed. You know, it also says, what do we do with South 24th Street, south of Richard Downey? Again, that's all industrial. Google owns one side. It proposed a data server farm there at one time. Now you got this freezer project. I mean, ideally, we would like to see the intensity of the industrial development decrease as you go north, when you get to the recreational complex and the commercial stuff. And I think that's our challenge right there.
So if we rezone the whole parcel, and they're only going to use a portion of it, if they decide to lease the rest of the land to the farmer who's using it, I mean, is that still gonna be allowed?
Sure. It's farmed now.
Right.
I mean, they could expand into it someday.
Ground's gonna be worth more, presumably.
You know, they
It's ready to go.
could perhaps build
that
a,
sense.
you know, roadway there and split it off, sell it. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of different options, and I assume it depends upon the future of that business and the success they have there. But I think they'll be here if they're not here
I
already.
think they're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for them.
Because of the confusion of the planning commission, I asked their
Yeah.
legal counsel if he would come, if you have questions for him too.
Is there anything that's been raised that, or hasn't been raised that you wanted to speak to us about?
Do you want me to come up?
Please, the main reason for coming up is just so that there's a record of it, otherwise the video can't, it doesn't pick up what you're saying.
I mean, I think from our standpoint, and I think it comes out in the staff report, the only real reason to have, well, in our opinion, is to have some reservation of the project is the fact that sanitary sewer needs to be extended, and there's a certain condition of Gifford Road. You know, and we've made that subject, and we will be having conversations, we'll have conversations with legal, whether or not these are just conditions and the zoning takes place upon those being satisfied, or whether we actually have a contract that deals with that. So,
Don, before he speaks to this, did you get any sort of response from Echo Electric?
I did talk with them, they have not expressed concerns to me.
Good.
Don,
Good.
wasn't the RISE grant that's being applied for to help bring Gifford Road back up did I miss something there? I thought that was the
It
grant
is.
you were applying for.
But I can't guarantee you that that will be approved.
No, but I'm very optimistic.
Well,
Because-
I have to think, what if?
Yeah, and if it isn't approved, and yeah, we definitely have to think what if. I'm hopeful that we do get approved, but this whole thing could eventually open up a lot more land for development. And we,
Well,
the
that would be
council, us, are in desperate need of industrial parcels that can be developed. We just really need that, so I'm hoping we get that grant, and I'm hoping this maybe will help to.
You would think it would help it, yeah.
Hello, my name's Bob Daly. I'm a lawyer for Gear Land and Consolidated, and Aaron from Consolidated's here if you have any sort of technical engineering questions. We're buying the whole site. The seller leases it to a farmer currently, and he's not going to, we really don't need the whole site, but he's not going to sell us a piece of it. It's, you know, all or nothing, which is fine. The plan was, and our application was, rezone the whole site. That came up for a vote, 3-5 against rezoning the whole site. One of the planning commissioners then suggested, well, you really only want to develop part of it anyhow. How do you feel about just rezoning the part that your initial footprint's going to be? And I think we're okay with that, because we don't know what's going to happen to the rest of the land. For now, we'll just lease it to the farmer. So that came up sort of a revote. I'm not really exactly how that works, but it came up for a revote, and that was a 4-4 vote just to rezone a portion of it. So I think that's basically no vote at all, in effect. We're happy with either, rezone the whole site or just the portion we're going to use initially.
Let's just do it. I don't see
Yeah,
the
I
point
think
in
we should
waiting.
double
That's
side.
certainly, that's what's going to happen there. It doesn't make sense to
I
do
agree.
it piecemeal, keep
Right.
agricultural there.
Yeah.
I recognize that's a placeholder, but I don't think it needs to hold a place anymore.
Any other questions?
No, you called us, which was nice. Thank you for that ahead of time and
Okay,
answering
thanks.
questions.
Thank you.
All right. Other ordinances, questions?
On C, just the question that I continually ask every time, the 1994 comprehensive plan shows that area as AP. Does the 2030 plan what is that? Again, it's in process, it's a new plan, but I assume we're going the right direction, you don't know? Okay.
I don't know. I would be of the opinion AP is appropriate. Quite frankly, the block to the north of what the county owns, the block to the east probably should be also designated AP. It just gives a little bit more flexibility to do both multifamily and a mixture of offices, and I think that area, quite frankly, is in transition, and it's probably appropriate. Even if they don't build it.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out, what I particularly like about it, and I know it's probably really small from there, is the fact that the current city requirements with regard to trees, not only on the perimeter, but in the interior of the parking lot, so that when you come in to downtown on the South Expressway or exiting downtown, you're not looking at asphalt, you're looking at a nice treed way, which certainly keeps that nice urban look. Plus, I mean, the less we have asphalt on the door-to-door downtown, the better. So I really commend them for wanting to do this and following the city codes that have been instituted with wise foresight over the last few years.
I think that location between the on and the off of the South Expressway really limits any desirability for any type of residential
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah,
Definitely.
No,
Easy access.
and
That's very true.
Kind of,
and
yeah.
hopefully we're not needing to expand the juvenile detention facility quite that much, so it seems like a better use to do something for the veterans.
Questions on resolutions?
I have something on 7B unless somebody has 7A.
I did on 7A, just a question for Dick. I noticed in going over the proposed agreement that has the controlling law to be Pennsylvania law, since UDA is headquartered in Pennsylvania. Are you comfortable with that?
My preference would be Iowa law.
Is that something that they were hard over on, or?
Was not involved in that agreement.
Don may know.
Okay.
It'd be nice to have venue as well, if
Yeah.
possible, so that, if there were any dispute, it would be here and we wouldn't have to go to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's a good point, good catch.
Because you can actually try it here under Pennsylvania law, you could try it there under Iowa law. It'd be better to try it here than under Iowa law,
Yeah,
I would think.
I just saw that, maybe a little
Can-
nervous, just in case. I also was looking at Exhibit 2, the breakout of costs for HDR and others. Those are subcontracts that then are being set by UDA, or, so that's their business relationship and not ours. Got it. Okay, thank you.
What I just wanted to mention about the company itself, I'm really impressed, and I looked elsewhere at some of the things they list, and they do truly have a strong background from what all I've been able to find in urban design. I think it's so very important in our downtown areas to, I have nothing against suburban design, but I'm entirely against suburban design in an urban area, so I'm very glad to see that it's a company that will be within their area of expertise and something I think would be the best designing for that area.
Seven B, Len? You should-
yeah, 7B, so if I have my calendar correct, this development is going to be going on the same time as the interstate exchange and all that area that's going on now. So it's a mess now. It's going to continue to be a mess with access. And it just brought to mind again, is there anything we can do about
Gets
the
ready
inn?
for holiday shopping.
It is so crowded now.
I mean, the in and the out, it is ridiculous. There needs to be another exit point near Kohl's and Hobby Lobby. I don't know if there's anybody here that can speak to that. How can we make this happen? I called Kohl's and complained and they don't care.
Did you really?
What?
Yes. And I stopped shopping there, but I'm only one
If I
person.
may piggyback on that, why is Denmark, I think it's where Denmark meets Metro Drive. It's a three-way, it's a T-stop instead
Yeah,
of a
but
four-way.
this makes sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right, but last time we looked at this, it was like, well, they own that, so the pressure is on Kohl's, and I don't know who else. And they didn't really care when I called and complained.
Randy?
I get a lot of complaints about it.
A lot, so whose number do we give? Because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
who's- yeah,
about you, but I
exactly.
get a fair number of
I do too.
emails, especially around Christmas, yeah.
It does get.
And I do have Mike from Kimco and John from Target here also who can answer.
Oh, good,
Oh, good.
And they would gladly go through it with you.
okay?
You may have noticed something in your packet about a traffic study and whatnot. And we did this afternoon, before coming over here, I did talk with Public Works, and there were some recommendations that were in the traffic study. And we do intend to proceed with those. There's a lot of traffic on 275. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a state highway. We're gonna try and do everything we can within the subdivision. But it's kind of,
That's not really the area that you're.
Well, there's that area,
Well,
that's concern number one, and then concern number two is the Kohl's, but in that, so it's gonna be like a year and a half of just a complete bottleneck.
Yet, it's a true dilemma because the nice thing about having it be too busy in that area is it's too busy, so, it's both.
Right.
But I guess if we have to pick between the two, I suppose people probably want the store there, though I completely understand your point.
It would help, though, if there was that T made into, so like people can at least get out and go the other way.
I remembered it this
Avoid.
time, it's Denmark and Metro, because last time, it's hard to just try to describe it with hand signals. That's the.
Like I just did, it's the
Yeah,
T.
well,
would you like Mike to address?
Can someone address it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this
We
is like
can
the fourth or fifth
find
time I brought it up, and
A
I guess
lot.
I'll continue to bring it up until.
I really think about that intersection more than any other, believe it or
This is
not.
an annual holiday shopping dilemma.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not even
It's like that all
Christmas,
the time,
it's
Matt. You can't
weekends,
get out.
that it's ridiculous.
The angling is
Only
odd.
goes out.
Ridiculous.
I wasn't originally, I'm with Kimco, Mike Slusky, and we weren't originally, I wasn't originally involved with it up front, but this is, I think, on Kohl's parcel. We don't own the Kohl's or the Target,
Okay.
and I think this is on their parcel, so, I mean, I could talk to them about it and address it.
Any
You
please?
guys would want to open that up to a four-way intersection there?
Yeah, you cannot
can't get
get
to
out of
Kohl's.
those lots
Right.
going north. You have to go south. That's your only
Yeah,
option.
and trying to
On-
get
on a
out by,
normal
and
weekend, quite
and trying to get out by Hobby
Yeah.
Lobby, you've got cross traffic, and so you just sit there forever and a day, and it's
Can't get-
frustrating.
I see what you mean. No,
Yeah.
you can't make a left turn.
You can't.
Right.
There's no way.
It's,
Yeah,
you can't get in, you can't get out,
Because
and,
there's,
yeah.
kind of the roads are kind of, the cars are
Yeah.
coming and you're
Right.
trying to get out in front of
exactly,
them.
yeah, there's no lights, if you could maybe have a loud
Go the other way,
conversation with
so I
them.
Never could figure out what you were talking about.
Sure.
And
You can go the
they're
other
more
way,
than welcome to
that's for
call
sure.
me if they need a second opinion.
Okay.
Or we,
I'm kinda shy, though, I
or
don't know.
if you give us your number, we'll give it out to people. So they
I'm
can call
already getting
you.
people that say, what can the
I
city
think my
do?
number's already up there, so
Sure.
we get calls all the time, so.
Okay.
It's because it's a city street.
And on the plus
they
side,
think
there's
we
been a
can-
lot of excitement about
Well,
it going
yes,
in.
yes.
They think it's a city, so, we get the comments.
Well, it
They might
is
as well
your
pass it along.
street.
Right, it's our street.
I
We can't
understand
make
that,
you-
but
We
we
can't-
can't
it's
just
private
go down
property.
and cut it opening.
Yeah.
Or can we?
That's like my
Um,
favorite.
It'd be a very expensive eminent domain issue.
It can be kind of like an oops, sorry.
Oops. It was always there.
I don't know if I answered anyone's question, but I will
I think you
mention
did.
it to them.
Well, if you could just look into it, I mean, we really
We
do
will.
get, people complain terribly
You
about it.
probably never would have thought of it if no one ever tells you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we've heard this before, so.
Can you get back to us and let us know what the response was?
Yes, I will do that.
And I hope you get a different response than I got.
I will.
Great.
No, I will get back to you. I
Oh.
don't know.
Excuse me, pardon, excuse me?
Sir?
Sir?
Sorry. With respect to the additional development, is there an anticipation of any future requests for financial incentives related to
Not
that?
at this time. Hopefully, we
just-
don't have too many more roads we have to address.
Just wanted to make sure I got that one down on the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
It's important.
Very good.
Since we are on that subject, may we ask another question?
Sure.
In regard to the resolution? Thank you. John Dietrich, Target Corporation. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Mike and I are here because we're essentially joint applicants for the proposal to subdivide the Target property and place a Dick's Sporting Goods and other retail out there. We have no questions, no qualms, no issues with any of the staff recommendations, and we look forward to having the approvals with one exception, and that is the amount of parking that is being requested. And we have, I have a couple maps here, if I could just ask to pass those around. I'm sure you'll be happy to speak to that. In terms of the parking, we were at the Planning Commission and we raised this issue in regard to the parking that is proposed on the plans that have been submitted. And it is Target and Kimball's request to look at the 27 stalls that are currently on the Target property and the 4 stalls that are currently on the proposed Kimco property, total of 31 stalls that are head-in to Metro Boulevard. It is our request that those 31 stalls be identified as paper stalls or proof of parking stalls, so that the existing landscape that is there today would remain as existing landscape, and that the proof of parking would be, if in fact there was an issue of parking, that those stalls would be installed at a later date. We're fine with the plans. We're asking that we phase the construction because those stalls are approximately 450 feet away from the Target front door, probably 450 feet away from the Dick's front door. And will someone park there? Yes, someone will. How many times per year? It may be once, it may be 0, but we are trying to put together a development, as Mike mentioned, with no incentives being provided from the city. And, you know, that's well over a six-figure number to put in 31 stalls. So it is our request that those be shown on the plan, not installed, that it just becomes a, the existing exterior drive, 20 more feet of landscaping. We think it's more aesthetic and it's better instead of building parking that essentially will not be used.
Is that a piece of ground that would be large enough to be used as a separate building in the future, since it's got, I imagine it couldn't front towards the main road there because it'd be probably too close to the intersection with the state highway, but it certainly would have good frontage as you entered that part of the development.
Which one, Nate?
Plus, if you
No,
add
this
more.
little-
Or am I looking at the wrong
I think
spot?
they're just talking about this, you're talking about this little,
Yeah,
little
yeah.
strip right here?
There'll be,
Down here or
this
my
little-
way
no.
out?
This up here, Nate, like right here?
yes,
This
little
little line.
Oh, excuse me, I'm in the wrong.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong
I see it,
section.
I see it.
Don, what are your thoughts on that?
It makes sense.
And that's landscaping today, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, it does make sense.
It makes sense. I mean,
It's landscaping, there's a couple parking lot holes that are in there.
Like,
You can say they're not asking for assistance, but the whole development got assistance.
Right.
Right.
And I assume that was reflected in the fact that they purchased land at a lesser price. Just want to make that clear. We wouldn't be recommending it. I mean, we have parking requirements that require so many spaces, and it was brought up at the Planning Commission. I believe they concurred with staff's opinion. They haven't changed it, so.
Yeah, and we've been upholding that parking ordinance, and it is expensive, and we've made everybody else, to my knowledge, I haven't seen a lot of wiggle room in that area.
you say to see more parking, we don't need.
If I may add a couple of comments. Target looked at over 118 sites nationwide for parking, where we've counted on the 8th busiest hour, Saturday before Christmas. And we've looked at how our stores operate, the demographics, the market it's in, number of transactions, basket size, et cetera, et cetera. I can frankly say that this site, with the amount of transactions that do take place, will most likely park anywhere from 400 and, I have the number right here, approximately 445 to 465 stalls. The target lot will have 546 stalls. I mean, that's well over 100 stalls. And I understand the 5 per thousand parking ratio. Target currently is at 4 per thousand. We are not asking that the plan not show the stalls. We're asking for flexibility to not install those stalls at this time.
Guess, just my observation, driving by there the number of times I have, that, yeah, it looks like that you could land a small aircraft in that parking lot most of the time, and that most people are not prone into parking on the backside of parking lots. So it does seem like a large piece of concrete that is not being very well utilized.
Correct.
That's what I'm torn on. I'd almost rather see the landscaping right up here than have more lots that aren't getting used, whereas, I mean, if it looks like it is crowded, obviously you have to put them in it.
So if it's on paper and there appears to be a problem later on down the road, then would that not be something that could be adjusted later on? We say, okay, this isn't just a paper plan anymore. We now ask you to go ahead and develop those parking spots.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
donkey.
The cars that can't get out are gonna have to queue up somewhere.
Hopefully not on the landscape.
Two things. One, this is zone PC, so council has every authority to, want to knock those out and leave them as landscaping. You do have that ability. Just make sure it's in the resolution. The real question is regarding a follow-up agreement or, which is fine, but what prompts it? What triggers it? What tells me, as a staff member going out there, I'm not gonna be going out there and counting these guys as parking. I mean, that's the challenge of how do you trigger it? And maybe they have an answer for that, but off the top of my head, I do not know what that would be.
My guess would be when Lynn expresses concern about the parking, be a good indicator.
I don't know when my suggestion was gonna be if you had enough complaints that there was enough parking there, or that people think there should be more parking, that we'd be glad to do it. I don't know how to enforce it, but I mean, wanna hold up building permits or
Because there's another proposed
CFOs
building.
or something like that. I mean, we have no problem with it. I mean, we're planning to do it if that's the way you guys go. We hope that you can see that it's better as landscape than as pavement. Looks nicer. I mean, I think we just heard someone talk about it. It's nice that there's trees and stuff like that, and I think it looks nice right now.
Yeah.
We've added a bunch of landscaping to the center. I don't know if anyone's noticed it, but we've upgraded the whole landscaping there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming you on your own, I mean, if there becomes a parking problem, your goal is sales. I mean, you're not gonna leave.
The customers won't
Yeah,
be complaining.
so, I mean, that's what I would assume is the customer is gonna trigger this by complaining to the store that there's not, I mean, you're gonna quickly notice, I would assume as a owner that there's.
I would anticipate we would know long before we
We
have
would.
a fairly active social media and our guests are not
Like
afraid to
when-
let us know.
We've seen a lowering of this across the country in most municipalities. They've all, Target even too, they used to require us to do 5. They've come down to 4. We have some centers that are 3. It's just we've seen that Lowe's, you'll notice Home Depots, Targets, they're all starting to build these out parcels in front of them because they figure they don't need all that parking that no one's using. So the trend has come down, so.
But to Sharon's point, if we've had other developers follow the rules and now we change midstream, what do we tell the next guy?
What was I think I remember something about parking, and I know you would be, I don't know, with Walmart. Wasn't there like that, not Walmart, but that new development?
It was the landscaping. I
Yeah,
think.
because that had to do with the parking, and what did we, do you remember?
Ordinance.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And we
yeah.
had to do something, because otherwise they couldn't meet our landscaping requirements and the parking.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We'll listen on that. And in a planned commercial, the council will always have the latitude.
I don't know that this is the only
Answer
thing.
to Lynn's question, to allow these types of variances from the hard and fast rule. That's the whole idea behind the plan.
Right.
You get to vary from some of your standards.
So we did do a variance in Gordman's
I
then?
thought we did,
I-
but I don't know for,
I
I thought
thought
we did something
so, because
to
it
allow
was
for more
impossible to
landscaping
meet both
and less
rules.
parking, but.
I think we allowed them to use the property that they bought for their retention and detention to count as some of their landscaping. We didn't reduce their parking spaces, we reduced their landscaping requirement,
I think you're
as I remember it.
That
I
sounds
see,
right.
yeah.
That sounds right.
I guess my concern, I'm just looking at it, and it looks like there's space for another building on that corner. And so that's gonna add more parking needs when that goes in, and if they don't want theirs to, yeah, I just don't know at what point, when you have an ordinance in place, and I understand it's PC, we have the ability to do that. It just concerns me that because this one's in a PC, I'm gonna say, well, yeah, it's gonna cost you money. It costs everybody money every time they have to put those parking places in, and they're running, what do you guys estimate per parking stall? It's not cheap. Six,
Probably 5,000 to 6,000.
yeah, that's what I thought, it was about 6,000 a stall is the last I remember. It's
What's-
always expensive.
What's the cost though, if you do put landscaping in, then you need stalls, does the cost go up? Cause now you're gonna have to remove landscaping and do stalls, that would increase your cost, right?
Landscaping's already there though, so
It-
we would request to leave it as it is today.
I see.
And then, yeah, so we're not,
Well, this this proposed building on the corner is yours as well, right? That's the
the multi-tenant building.
that could be
is
what could
proposed,
kick-
yeah, to go.
Yes.
to go.
So what if we leave it as landscaping until the proposed building becomes more of a reality and then look at it then?
The building's pretty much close to a reality right now, so.
Oh,
Oh, it is.
okay.
We're gonna be coming, I mean, we have.
Do you have
elevations
tenants
done and all
for the
that.
pad site? You've got.
Because then that's kind of different, then you do have.
So you won't be requesting any reduction in your parking requirements for that parcel?
No, it's already
Correct.
factored into all the calculations.
The new parcel with Dixon, the outlot building, is 5.24. So really, the new development is exceeding code slightly, and the waiver is essentially allowing Target to go from a 5.0 to a 4.25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see,
Yeah,
okay.
because that's taken away from Target when they build this extra thing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think
I've never
I
really
think I'm okay.
understood, other than the
Yeah, but
fact
I just
that
need to-
parking needs to fit in, the parking on the wedge around the perimeter, like a boundary fence. I suppose on the day after Thanksgiving, I've seen it used, but I can't say I've ever seen it used, even on that day,
Just
more than
seems
an
like-
hour or two.
Yeah, it seems like a vast
Yeah.
ways of assessments. I mean,
With our national campaign of looking at efficiencies of site, parking is a huge element. And as part of what we're trying to do is have the right number of parking, and believe me, we want the right number of parking. And we are gonna make sure we have the right number of parking, but through the studies of 118 sites across the country, looking at standalone stores, urban stores, suburban stores, we know how that store is going to park based on the volume of that store. And the square footage factor of X stalls per square foot is really somewhat not relevant to how this store and our corporation and operation function. So we've dialed it in, and we wouldn't be standing here asking for this waiver of in the PC district if we thought it would harm or we would not have enough parking.
So I guess what you're saying very nicely is rephrase that, given the laws of supply and demand, if you had a deficit of parking spaces, you'd be the first out there ripping up trees and building parking if there's a need for it.
Yes, sir.
which makes sense. I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah.
It is a main exit. I don't see it so much as potentially violating the rule, but perhaps being a good exception to it of, You know, it's something fair enough, it's on the exit out as opposed to coming in, but it's near this state highway. It's what people will see when they're driving by. And I would rather see a lot of landscaping in an area than acres of parking lot
That's what
that's
I.
not even getting used. So I see it as, I take the point entirely about the rule, but I don't think the rule necessarily applies very well here. So I see this as a legitimate exception.
So because it's a resolution, if we do go with this, Dick, the development plan is being amended, so we amend the amended resolution?
You go with staff recommendation except for the request regarding the additional parking stalls by Target. And what was it, 32?
31
31.
stalls.
On the plus side, there was a lot of excitement over the opening of Dick's. It was in the paper. I think there was a lot of Facebook media and messages about it, so we're excited that you guys are coming
We're
here.
excited about adding that synergy to that shopping center.
Let the traffic nightmare begin.
Thank you.
There was a lot of good mention of it on local media about
was
it. I
all over.
can't say anyone said this is a horrible idea, and I don't think anyone up here is saying that it would be.
Although I do have a question, I don't know if goes more to Don or possibly Art, but we were pretty excited about Bass Pro as well, and we kind of have a financial stake in the financial viability of Bass Pro. Has there been any analysis as to how this might impact their long-term prospects, their current location?
Well, there certainly are common lines sold. Dick's has an outdoor area where they sell North Face gear and that type of stuff. So that,
Are they a direct
it'd be
competitor?
foolish to think that they're going to do something.
I've always found them to be slightly different. I don't think of, when I'm going to one or the other, and I personally have preference one or the other, it's kind of like the difference, I suppose, between going to, I don't know, whether you're going to go to Target or Walmart to get your something.
Like one, I guess to me seems more like sports, and one seems more like
Yeah, I didn't think they
outdoor
were the same.
I've
activities.
always took Dick's to be more
There's a
sports.
crossover, but it's not 100%. It's not, they're not
Or like
competitors.
kids
And not
playing
as-
as opposed to
A
going
lot of
fishing
hunting
and
and
hunting.
fishing and
Dick's has
basketball.
actually created a new concept. It's called Field and Stream.
Yeah.
And that's a direct competitor to Bass Pro.
So Cabela's is more of a Bass Pro direct competitor, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Sure there's.
Everyone crosses over. I mean, now you
Yeah.
walk in.
Dick's is more apparel based, although they do have equipment. They probably sell kayaks, and I suppose somewhere in Bass Pro they have a kayak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's some hunting, but probably much more concerned about Cabela's than there would be about
Yeah.
Dick's.
Yeah.
Just thought I would ask the question, just to make sure that we're not signing on to something that we develop a problem later on down the road.
Yeah, good question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other resolutions, questions?
I got a question on D. So just to clarify in my mind, so the study cost is 27,500. Is that a mixture of city funds and a grant, or is it all a grant, or I wasn't really clear the funding source of the study. And then my second comment is, that's in the area of the Mid-City Corridor meetings that we had, and I remembered immediately the number of parents that attended the last meeting complaining about unsafe conditions, needles, et cetera, in and around where they live, 8th and 2nd Avenue. And so I don't know if there are significant plans to add a PAR officer.
And there are two representatives, I
officer?
believe they're here on
Currently, there's
behalf
no
of
PAR officer
the
assigned.
issue of.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's no PAR
Becky and
assigned to
Wayne,
that
if you wanted to
particular
come sit.
location. You have
One down now.
Right, so are you guys looking at, since this is sort of a renewed area of focus, is that something that you're looking at?
Once we get the new chief in, we'll talk about allocating manpower. So that's something that will be discussed.
Discuss with the new chief? Okay, thank you. And I repeated your words because you weren't on microphone.
And you, oh, I'm sorry, please answer a question.
The total cost in the application, the budget
Yeah,
27.5, that grant application will be 16.5 if approved. 11,000 will be basically in-kind work.
okay.
It'll be staff, but it also will be I'm gonna, I forget the name. Used to be the preservation lines, what's it called now?
Preserve Council
Preserve
Bluffs.
Preserve
with
Council Bluffs. I mean,
Significant assistance from some of the neighbors too. of whom are
They will
here.
go out and do a lot of the legwork for the historians.
Okay,
So copying, things like that.
okay, thank you.
So I just want to understand the whole thing a little bit better. Is it proposing that this would become a historic district where there'd be, when you want to fix your house up, you have to go to a board? You know, I know that was discussed before for the Bluff Street neighborhood. Is that where the intent of this to end up is?
No.
Well, it is a study to do, determine whether or not there is enough historic significance to actually do a district. I assume on a federal level. If it's done on the federal level, then that just causes people like Brenda and I an extra step to go through and spend federal money, okay? That doesn't come down to an individual property,
Okay.
unless they're using federal funds.
Okay.
However, if we truly believe that these areas are historic, we should be putting Bluff Street and Third and Park and Glen and Oakland on our local district.
I don't have, my problem is that when it gets to the point where you have to go before a board and you have to use certain materials and you have to do it in a certain way, the problem with that is the studies have shown that in neighborhoods where most of the properties are already rehabbed, that's all well and good.
Yeah.
But where they're not, they won't get rehabbed because the cost of doing that is so extreme. So I just want to be careful in that, you know, when you put those kind of restrictions on a property, the two options, walk away or, you know.
Well, we're certainly nowhere near that yet. I would love to see us reach a point where a lot of the parts of the country significantly older than our part is. When I say older, I mean with, I suppose, European settlement, if you will. Take like the Northeast, particularly New England. Yeah, there are parts where, or even parts of the West, but mostly the East, where they do have these additional restrictions. And I would like to see them, but I know that the majority of folks in even those areas right now would, in my belief, would very much strongly disagree with that statement. So I don't see it happening probably in our lifetime. I think it'll happen, you know, if those, what we can do right now, this is a label that, but for, you can't, make it harder to put a federal highway through it. Not that we'd put a federal highway there. I can't imagine that makes sense. But other than that, it doesn't affect what you can do with the property whatsoever. It's an important designation. Hopefully you get more people in there spending their money to fix it up, to encourage it. So thereby, in 50 or 100 years, where we're starting to get truly old, then there'll be enough support in that area where people will say, that's what we want, that we want to live here, and fair enough, then we will institute it. But well, all of our stuff will be torn down by then, quite frankly, if we don't take these initial steps right now to give people an incentive. And by incentive, I don't mean money, unfortunately, but.
Well, and I was going to say very clearly in some of the communities you're talking about, there's historic funds available to apply for, and in Iowa, that fund has been really lacking.
Yes.
If that fund
We don't
had
take it
money in it.
seriously, you know.
Yeah, if that fund had money in it and there was monies available to restore these homes back to the way they should be, even with low interest or no interest loans, but, you know, to replace a window under those conditions versus to replace a window under normal conditions, the cost is extreme. And it can have it's fine in neighborhoods where you've already seen a big revitalization because it's not going to damage you if you do it. The neighborhood's going to hold its value already. But if, like on my street, there's more houses that have not been done. They won't get done. There are already some of them that are rentals. That's it. They're not going to put any money into them. So that's why I question it. It's a double-edged sword.
It is, and you know, and as you look at it, part of this too is groups such as the two neighbors who've been doing a lot of the lion's share of the work. here, Jackie Thompson and Wayne Anderson sitting in the third row there. I really think you ought to get credit. They've spent dozens of hours, and I'm aware of probably more, on the initial work to get these things going, working with Preserve Council Bluffs. So it truly is a neighborhood-driven initiative. That Preserve Council Bluffs is acting as, in some ways, as the pass-through, though they're doing a lot of the work too. And you know, I'll make the new window folks mad, but it's a lot less expensive to fix an old one than to buy a new one. And
Oh, yeah.
and they're pretty close to new standard. But part of that is groups like that. I think it goes to that point. It goes to the more those groups are active, people will hear at least that side of the argument. They might not agree with it, but and finding ways to get those resources. And maybe again, we used to have a program which I know we don't have enough staff to administer presently. To get some money in there to do some things we used to do.
Yeah, clearly, I want to be clear, I live in a historic neighborhood, I love my historic neighborhood, but I also know that when it came up last time, when they were trying to do it on Bluff Street, and I went and did the research from across the country, what can happen? And that was my biggest fear, is that, you know, I want to paint my house a certain color, and I've got a board of people that are going to say, no, that's not a color that fits the period of time, and, you know, I need to replace a window. Well, you can only replace it with this custom-made window that's period. Well, you know, it is more expensive. I can fix my window for cheap, but I can't replace it for cheap.
And I unfortunately, I'd love to think that we're in the generation that gets to see those sorts of restrictions. People don't want it, and I don't see it happening for a very long time, probably 50, 100 years, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. But I think the market will drive it.
That's what I hope, that the market would drive it.
Yep, and things like this
Later.
help give that incentive. The more you get people in there who are wanting to spend a lot of money on something, because it's not a very good investment if you're looking to make money.
Oh, gosh, no.
As you know, as I know, as many of us know.
Yeah.
So to get folks like that in there, this helps.
Yeah, just keep in mind that, you know, people are pretty sensitive about their properties.
Yes.
And, you know, my castle is my castle, and I believe in some level of private property rights.
Oh, sure.
That if I want to put a lamp post out that looks like this, I don't really want a group of people telling me that's not the lamp post I should put out.
So the designation actually may not occur, it's just a study to see if.
Yeah. And he's saying even if it occurs, it's not going to come to that level at this point.
It's a listing. It just means that you can't use federal money to tear it down. But if you're going to do it, doesn't change anything locally. You'd have to be a local landmark, and then you'd go in front of the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'd encourage more of that too. And again, I hope we get there sooner than 50 or 100 years, but I'm afraid I don't think we will. But things like this.
50 or, I thought you said 1,500.
No. I think it's more like 50 to 100 years. I really do believe it's going to take that long. Not 15. No. If you thought I said 15, wow.
Doesn't sound like it works.
No.
Wayne, do you
I
wanna
wouldn't
come
make
back
it out of
up
here alive.
And give us, because I think Nate started having you come up earlier and then we got distracted. Do you want to?
Well, is there anything you'd like to say? I'd like to give you the opportunity. You've spent so much time on this. If you do want to speak, I'm sorry. We're not trying to be mean, but it won't record you, and then people understandably get a little upset that they can't hear what you're saying.
Well, the main thing I want to point out about a listing on the National Register of Historic Places is it is just a listing. What you're talking about as far as a commission coming in and telling you what to do is a totally different thing. The only time that enters into play is when you are getting possibly city, state, or federal money. That's the only time that it comes into play. Otherwise, it is just a listing.
Wonderful, and that's what I was trying to clarify.
And we've given money before. We have given restrictions on it.
It may be, your house may be in a district, but if you want to put steel siding on it, you may. If you want to put new windows in, you may. If you're,
You'll make me mad and I'll cringe, but nonetheless.
Nate'll come and
if it's only your house and you want to steel side it, you can. If you want to tear it down, the only thing you're going to do possibly is lose your listing. That's the only thing that'll happen to you. It is just a listing, and that
And when
has
we've
to be
given money
understood.
locally, and for example, in the city program, which again, we would need more funds to have folks to administer it. We didn't allow, for example, in an older neighborhood, you couldn't buy vinyl siding with it. A lot of those homes had it. Not that there's anything wrong with vinyl per se, but if you have an older house and you're giving money for historical accuracy, vinyl just isn't quite the thing.
This
Put it
is,
nicely.
this is not like covenants on
No.
a neighborhood. It's, like I said, it is just a listing, and that's all that it amounts to.
You know, we give those incentives, and that's the way to probably do it for the next 50 years, or hopefully less. The more you give those incentives for people, I got some myself when I first moved here, out of school and couldn't afford to get a few things fixed up. I'd got one of those grants, and it really is helpful to do it right. And the more we do that over time, you're right, it'll get up to that level.
And that's what I'm saying, like, my house is shake. I would never replace it with vinyl, but I did replace some with cement board. And I know that under that prior, you know, potential proposal that had been made in that neighborhood, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And there were no funds when I applied. So, you know, that's the whole thing. You just gotta keep things in perspective, and I don't want things to go. And so what you're doing is good. I like it, and I won't be opposed to that.
But what, I think what he said though is if you, in your circumstances, if you paid for that out of your own pocket, then you could do it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Okay.
why I said, that's
Oh,
why,
yeah.
I just wanted to clarify it, because when I was reading it, it's like, you know, I was on the planning commission when that neighborhood had brought forward, they wanted to do the actual historic district where you couldn't do anything to the house unless it
okay.
went through this. And that was very, very controversial at that time, and I just wanted to be certain that's not where we were headed with this one.
Not today.
I just wanted.
Please don't make promises for the future.
1,500 years from now.
1,500 years from now,
Yeah,
yeah.
I just wanted to mention that the 7th and 8th district has been proposed for a number of years. It's been on the historic tour. The Ollie the Trolley goes through our district. So what we're doing is picking up the project and trying to get it through. And it doesn't prohibit anybody if they're not designated, that house is not designated as on the National Register, then they can do whatever.
Well, thank you for all your
Thanks.
work.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
I'm glad that topic came up, actually, because there is a lot of completely understandable questions about the topic, because it is easy to conflate the two issues together, what National Register means, and there are a lot of people on the National Register who thinks it means those restrictions, and it doesn't. So it's good for them to know that.
Sure.
Any questions on 7E, F, or G?
On E, I just wanted to ask the proposal from HGM, they're anticipating costs of about $17,500. Is that coming out of the current CIP projections for funding?
Yes, that would be the funding source that's listed on the resolution, the cover
Okay.
lever.
Okay.
So, and that is, would be 100% on the city funding side.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
And I do want to compliment the staff, but if I may, Larry, that I did like the additional information about the process, and it was noticed. Thank you.
And actually, that's a project that's generating a lot of interest. I hear from a lot of people in Omaha how neat it is that we're doing that, so.
We've got a lot of kudos.
A lot of my friends come over here now to see our trails because, with all due respect to trails across the river, ours are phenomenally better. But it's true.
F or G?
On F and G, I'm kind of combining those two together. Concerning the block grant, I mean, that's a considerable amount being sought on each project, and it's roughly a little bit less than half of the total project cost for one, and a little bit more than for the other. There've already been home funds approved for that. I think one was, Wabash was for $164K, and Linden Place was for $150. And the request for housing tax credits for $500K were unfortunately rejected.
Well, neither one of those projects received tax credits last year.
Right.
So their funding from the city, whether they're home or whatever we had, is gone. We've reallocated that to other projects.
Okay, good.
So they have to start from anew.
Okay,
Now, both of these, you are going to see the following. They will submit this, but they will also probably submit a tax credit project. Why? Because they're not convinced that they're going to get this, okay? You know, I would be surprised if we get two, but, you know, why not ask?
To make a long story short, we're just covering all the bases.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, I hear the comment on the cost, but the cost are the cost. I think we live in a reality right now that, you know, I'll just take, for example, infill construction. Albeit these were maybe smaller structures, but when we started building single-family homes, we would build them for $55,000, $60,000. They cost now $152,000.
Well,
And I can tell you the median income of this area in the nation that qualifies for it hasn't went up. So construction costs are outstripping the affordability of a lot of people.
I noticed that the costs anticipated have been going down. For the projected overall project costs for Wabash, last staff package had it at about 7.1 million. Now we're at 6.3 million. And
Because there are different requirements that they have to meet in a tax credit project that drive some costs up.
Okay.
They provide some community facilities that might have been pulled out.
Yeah.
So there's just a lesser
There
standard.
were fewer units,
Making
I think, in
adjustments.
the gun school one, I believe.
Yeah.
By a considerable amount, I want to say like 8. It was like 45, 43, and now it's 36, I think.
36.
Yeah.
So certainly that would lower costs presumably because the building's going to be smaller.
And Wabash did have a lot of common, they had a massive amount of common before when it was gonna be,
They do.
I remember we went through that, and I think, I would assume that's what a lot of that was.
You know, and about that process, I asked one of the organizations that had applied as part of the process and did not receive a recommendation from staff for this particular funding, and I want to pass along a high compliment. They said they found the process very fair, very open. They found, you know, I've talked a lot about lately about having an open process that's seen as open, and they said it was. And in fact, they gave me an unsolicited comment that they thought the two, they liked their own proposal, of course, but they thought that the two had, that had received the recommendation from staff to come to us were better.
Well, I think after we talked with them, they realized that their project just simply was not ready. These are supposed to be construction-ready projects, meaning you own the land or you control it. All the utilities are in place, you got all your financing in place, your zoning is in place, so if you get approval that you can start construction in the spring. Sometimes we think the standards the state has is a little bit unrealistic, but some of these, you know, take, you know, Beacon Place too, that's what we're talking about. Well, it's not ready because 19th Street has to be fixed. You know, and even though we approve that, I mean, there are conditions that ultimately we'll have to meet. And we've got to figure out how to finance those, and we don't have the answer to that today. So it'd be foolish to submit it. They'll be looking for ways to cut things out, is what they'll do.
Thank you, Don.
All right, if my assumption is correct, we're through the resolutions. Anything on the licensure?
I've got, on 8C, the application says October, but our agenda says September, so I think it's actually October. And then there were some violations on lipsticks. Any thoughts or concerns on that vote?
I would feel more comfortable if we were to pull that out from the general listing and voted on separately.
Which one is it?
5, A5.
A5.
I agree.
lipsticks.
I concur.
There wasn't any.
And then Jody, was that the special event is it October or is it September?
I'm sure it was September. I was just on
Is
you said what said the October?
Well, the application that was in our packet, the download, I mean, I still can't get my download, but I do remember that it was October. And then I was just wondering, what is the event? It didn't really clarify it in all those pages.
having a band, an outdoor.
Do you see where it says October?
Yeah, it is September.
I saw on their written thing that it said September.
Yeah, it says September, but I
Okay. In the one where they fill in the
Late
blanks and
October
they
would
check
be
mark the
dicey.
boxes, they've got October in two spots.
they do have October there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
I'll have to
Surely
verify
they'd
that,
be doing it in
that's what
September.
they fill,
Yeah,
they
that'd
fill
be
that
really cool.
online through the state.
I'm
so I'll
not,
verify
you would
what
take a
date it
risk in
is.
late October.
That'd be really cold.
I'm pretty sure it's September, because when she was here, the map that she drew, we talked, that's why she wrote the date there, because I told her to write the date on
Okay,
there.
well, right, yeah, I just thought I would ask, because I saw the
Yeah.
two different dates.
I feel a little bit like Rick Perry here, so don't indict me later on down the road, but, you know, I hear 8A number 5, let's pull that out, 3 people agree to do that. I just wanna caution you that the state of Iowa, then we appeal that to the state of Iowa, and at some point, they're gonna get to the point where they're gonna say, yeah, this is Council Bluffs again, just forget about it. I mean, I've got 2 serious complaints about goofies again that need to be addressed down there. There's people partying in the street, throwing bottles, breaking bottles, unmentionable things that I won't bring up here, and I just, if you, I get it if you disagree with the operation, but I don't know that we want to keep bouncing stuff in Des Moines, because when we want them to pay attention, they're not going to pay attention again.
Exactly.
Well, just for the record, I mean, I guess I do agree
They
with
got
pulling it out.
violations, that's fine, but.
Right, no, I do agree with pulling it out because it has violations, but I don't know that it necessarily will fail on a 3-2 vote.
And I don't either. It just on that sort of thing, and
It maybe sends a message, I just, to pull it out and do something here, but I just
Yeah.
want to caught.
no, I understand that
For
completely.
whatever it's worth, I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
trying to discourage you, I'm not trying to be Rick Perry, but.
Yeah, when it comes down to, there are times, and I remember a comment you had said, and I think when I first was on council very early on, about how there's 1 or 2 you don't want to discourage reporting, and I take that to heart.
Yeah.
And it comes down to that gray area of, okay, where's the line? Have they crossed it? And that's, sometimes a debatable point, but I would take your point that you wouldn't want to cross that line all the time. I agree.
And what might be helpful, just for everybody, is if Dick, like at some point, there's certain things that I know from when we did it with Goofies, we went in depth about what was gonna make it stick and what wasn't. Maybe, not for this one sits today, but maybe it'd be helpful for everybody to see again what that was. I know a lot of people weren't here when we had to make that decision.
Well, in reality, I'd prefer to have these suspensions be done separate from when we're reviewing a license. We rely on the police department to let us know when there's a bar with a problem, and we don't have to wait for its license to come up to take action against it.
Oh, we don't?
No.
Okay.
Anytime we've got a series of events that have occurred, we can come to the council and request that this license be either suspended or revoked. And I think we're better off taking it there and making a record that we can take on to the state as opposed to just shoot from the hip sometimes.
And I guess the question there is, I'm concerned if we have enough manpower to be able to do that. I recognize the number one priority of the police, of course, is to go out and take active calls,
Well,
not write these.
But at the same time, these active calls at the bar, it's a lot of police time. If
That's
at
a
2
good
o'clock
point.
every Friday and Saturday, they're supposed to have 5 cruisers down at one location,
Yeah.
they'll be the first to say, we gotta do
Right.
something about this. Usually they are, I should say.
I guess under that, I'm just surprised we don't hear that more often. And maybe just the common notion of how many that there might be isn't accurate. I'm not sure. But I personally, I'm surprised we don't hear more often because, you hear from enough people, including police, of places, and I don't recall them coming to us necessarily.
Well, and for me, I mean, my vote tonight, I asked the question, did they have any qualms with renewal? So I have no reason to vote no if the police are in favor of it, personally.
All right, anything else on the applications, permits? So,
I have something back on the resolution. I just, my downloads aren't working, but my email is, and we all got an email this afternoon from someone asking us to expressing his concern about Dick's Sporting Goods.
I just got that
Oh,
while we were
I
sitting
don't-
here. It came like while we were
He is
I
the
haven't
owner of
seen it.
Midwest Sporting
Oh,
Goods at 305 East Broadway. So, just wanted to
oh,
bring that
oh,
up.
yeah, I did get that.
Yeah, I just got it while we were sitting here.
His concern is repetitive product.
I understand that, but I also think it's free market. But I get his point.
There's competition everywhere.
Yeah, and it does tend to make.
No, I just wanted to bring that up in case
Well,
you
thank
guys
you.
don't check your emails till tomorrow.
It's not right.
Like, 'cause I
it
normally-
popped up on mine right when they
I
were
would
talking.
normally-
Actually, I was like, what's this? Oh.
And that normally would be me.
Okay, moving on, and if you don't have a dog in the fight, you're welcome to leave, but we've got two non-agenda items, nonprofit funding discussion and CIP discussions. And we're starting with the nonprofit funding. I don't know how you want to handle it. I'll let you take it over.
Well, I mean, you asked us a couple weeks ago to kind of put our thoughts together of how we would respond to nonprofit organizations coming to the city and ask for money, and in my opinion, the taxpayer who pays taxes to the city of Council Bluffs, they probably, I don't want to speak for everybody, but they may not be appreciative of their tax dollars going to a charitable organization that they may or may not support. And so I would be extremely hesitant about giving city taxpayer funds to a nonprofit. And I know we've donated to the YMCA. That it's kind of like there's a gray area. If maybe serves a purpose that the city would have to offer as a service, but another organization is, I would be more amenable to it. But a straight out charitable donation on the backs of the taxpayers, I'm not supportive of that. That's my opinion.
And I appreciate the sentiment that you brought to this, Mayor, and I agree that we should not do as some other governments have done and start handing out money here and there. We do have certain things, though, that we do fund for the interests of community development. And just looking through the community development block grants, I see that we had about 8 or so nonprofits that were receiving rather modest grants for purposes of relief to certain parts of the population to help mitigate the effects of our national economy, if you will. And so, and that there are other things that come into the ballpark of community development where you could at least make a case that the city derives a long-term benefit, perhaps efficiencies of a nonprofit doing something that the government might well be less efficient at doing. So I think if we could at least make that nexus for those sorts of things, you would have a better argument to make rather than just, gee, I like your recommendation to, that I suggest that we buy 15,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. It doesn't do much for community development. So I guess does that make...
Or my waistline, or anybody's.
That's kind of what was in my brain, and you said it a lot better than I did.
Now all I can think of are cookies. I think it comes down to, is it something that directly relieves a city service? Would we have to do it anyway? Those ones I think are relatively more obvious. But there are some indirect ones. For example, if you're helping some of the smaller neighborhood groups, they're not a business. They're not going to make money. They're volunteer driven. Having those neighborhoods do things where, does that indirectly, though tangibly, reduce crime? I would say it does. So I think if it's something that would truly go to a city service directly or some indirectly like that. And then I got to thinking about what happens when there's a leveraging grant, like to get this grant, they needed a de minimis amount from the city. And I thought, should that be a separate exception, if you will? And then I thought, no, maybe not, because would that not be something that directly relieves the city or indirectly has some tangible benefit that, you know, I think the easiest examples are ones that are way on one side or the other as opposed to that giant gray area in the middle. But, you know, we have a possibility, let's pick a ridiculous, we have a possibility of buying a Rembrandt and the city has to put up $100,000 for it. And probably not, that's not really a city service. But, you know, if Bluffs Downtown needs $2,000 to leverage $100,000 for a state grant or a federal grant, is that something directly related to the city or indirectly close enough? I'd say yes. And then there's, you know, some places, a lot of places I looked, have the larger ones above a relatively low threshold go through council. But, you know, a lot of places, including locally across the way, they have something called the mayor's grant, particularly for neighborhoods, things that like if you need $50. Well, you know, like for example, you know, a lot of the larger grant programs funded by various foundations end this year, and a lot of them are, I'm told, won't be renewed. Some may be, but a lot of them won't be, at least existing ones. And so there's no guarantee of those continuing past this year. And you know, if those sorts of groups need $50 for something, should that come to council? And I'd say no. It seems to me there ought to be some pot, relatively small, but some pot of money towards grants like that where it's regularly published, I don't know, quarterly or what have you. So obviously everybody can take a look at it. But I don't personally think it, I don't want to, as a council member, second guess a $50 grant. I think there ought to be some minimal threshold and then a cap on the overall amount. So if we've spent that money for the year, we've spent it. But I do think, and that'd be something I think to the mayor.
Subject to the same criteria in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would have to
Absolutely.
reduce a city service.
Absolutely, because I don't want to vote on every small, relatively very tiny, but to those groups means a lot. I think that's certainly within the discretion of the mayor, and I would think that would be something that could be done.
But there's that other group out there, the Potawatomi County Foundation or whatever, they give grants to neighborhoods.
That ends
like
this,
that.
yeah, there are a couple ones. That one ends this year. That one was a
that ends?
grant, yeah, it does. I can't say 100% it won't come back. The current round definitely has ended after this year. It was a joint activity of the Potawatomi County Community Foundation and the Neighborhood Center. They both had pieces of it. The Neighborhood Center acted as the program manager for it, and of course the Community Foundation acted as the finance arm of it. That one ends this year, and we've been told that won't be renewed. I'm trying to think of the other one. Live Well Council Bluffs has the curb grant, and I can't speak intelligently to whether that'll be renewed or not. But the response you generally get when you ask folks is they don't know, because it'll apply year to year, and it depends on the idea of the funder that year, whether it gets funded. But nothing gets funded forever, so. Should we have something where the city has a stake in, you know, something near and dear to my heart, of course, is neighborhoods. Is it something that, should the city have a role to play in that? I don't think we ought to buy them a Rembrandt or we ought to buy them a park, but, you know, the smaller things, does that reduce crime? Does that help make the city a better place to be? Is that a proper use of government? I think it is.
It's really hard though, because, you know, that's something that's near and dear to your heart. Mm-hmm. You know, what if it's, you know, economic development, everybody, well, the chamber, they do great things for local businesses. Should we be buying tables at their receptions?
Well,
no.
I agree.
Personally, no. And I guess what I would like to see is, you know, in my thoughts, what we should do is we should have a fund set aside that didn't originate from tax dollars to begin with. And I would like to see somebody outside of the city and the city council be the ones to give those grants. So set something up through the Pot County Foundation and say, Community Foundation, say these monies are designated, you know, to Council Bluffs activities, not outside of the city limits, and give some, you know, boundaries where we'd like to see it used, and let them make those decisions. Because here's the problem, is that, you know, one of us might have, you know, the Y might be really important to us. Another one, it might be the Red Cross. Well, you know, the Red Cross, how do you say they don't do great things for the community? We have a house burned down, they go in, they try to give them a place to stay for the night. They help the fire department figure out what's going to happen to these families. it gets big fast. I can justify just about any request that comes in here and figure out how that helps the city of Council Bluffs. But again, you know, that I don't really want to see the city taking my tax dollars and reallocating them. You know, Advanced Southwest Iowa, CVB, those are things that the city has basically contracted out instead of hiring people to do themselves. Some cities hire their own economic development director, some do it like this, but I think it's getting really complicated when I listen to Nate,
Well,
you know,
most
because I
cities
agree.
do. Most cities of our size actually do it as a city function. I'm not advocating that, but things to do with neighborhoods or groups, or they at least have a group do something. A city of our size to not work on those is why we have so many neighborhoods that we have to go in and do those.
But we have other funding sources that maybe those cities don't, so their city has to.
Right.
I mean,
They just make it a priority and we haven't.
And maybe
And maybe we shouldn't, but I think we should.
There's something I think real quick they touched on, like the point you mentioned, though, like buy a table for the chamber or for the.
Right.
There's a difference in what we're doing with money. Like it's one thing if the group is asking for money because they do need this to get a grant, to get a bigger grant or show, and it is going to help the city versus us giving money to go to an event or for just one specific. I mean, I think that's a big difference too.
Well, and I mean, I'll be the first one. I didn't want Bluffs downtown to not get their opportunity to become a Main Street community because we wouldn't participate. And that is something that keeps being put on these groups. The Y had to have city buy-in to be eligible for funds. And I think that's almost a different situation than do we write checks to the people that walk into Matt's office and say, well, we're doing a fundraiser and we want the city to donate,
I just encourage you to take a look at it because, the reason why those organizations require that local match is because they're trying to encourage local governments to do this. This is best practice. I grant you it shouldn't be a lot of money. There should be strong restrictions on it, what it can be used for. But I think we ought to at least look at the question of should we do something? I'm talking really tiny here. Because truly no one else will do it. We've been able to rely on one large local funding source, but after this year they may not fund it.
For the neighborhood groups?
Yeah, it ends this year.
But here's the thing. Okay, so this is what I'm going to throw out there. This is where it gets ugly, Nate.
Sure.
If I've got this group that wants to be in charge of the neighborhoods and they're asking for money from the city, and I got this group that thinks they're in charge of the neighborhoods and they're asking for money.
Sure. I think
the
it ought to be
council's
the
gonna have
neighborhoods
to-
directly. I don't think you ought to.
The associations themselves can
Yes,
apply.
absolutely.
And I can see that, and I'm not saying I wouldn't want to spend money that way, but what I'm saying is how do we get some parameters set out as to where do we draw those lines? Because I promise you that anybody that's come into his office with a request, I could figure out a way to squish that into it helps the city.
I don't want to
think that's
reinvent the
good
wheel.
enough.
They've got written policies, including across the river has got a really good one, I think. Maybe you'll disagree, but it's something to look at.
I like that.
I encourage you to take a look at it.
I mean, whatever we do, we have to be crystal clear on the whys, because, otherwise we'll have a taxpayer mutiny that,
Sure.
I'm paying taxes for city services, et cetera, and that means police, fire, parks, et cetera. And now you're giving my hard-earned tax dollars to a charitable organization that I, one, maybe don't know, or number two, don't support. I mean, I would be madder than heck if that was happening, and I don't want to see us having a room full of people saying, why did you give away my tax dollars?
Exactly.
There's a hole in my street out front,
No,
fix my street,
I agree, but we also have to move as a city of 62,000 people and a metro of 900,000. At least, and maybe it's philosophical difference, and that's fine. But I personally see government as not doing everything. Don't get me wrong, but I do think it's more than just filling the potholes. We spend a lot of money on parks for a purpose. We do a lot of quality of life things so that employers want to locate here, people want to live here, kids don't want to flee to other places that might have more fun things to do or more jobs. And I think we've got a small part to play in that. I'll grant you the private sector's got the major lion's share of that. But I think why have parks, why have these things if we're not doing something on the programming side? We don't have enough money, and I don't think people would want locally a governmental department that did the events, did all those. A lot of cities, including some our size, not generally in the Midwest, I'll grant you, do that, and I'm not advocating that. But this might be a case of the nonprofits, that is the neighborhoods, or other groups that are tangibly located in tangible results within the city, probably do it better than government. I think they do.
But I guess my thing is that why couldn't we, though, have money set aside with the Pot County Community Foundation designated for those groups to apply to? Let them make the judgment, you know, and what's a neighborhood group gonna ask for? What is it they're gonna need? And have we gotten those requests? What, I mean,
Right now, they generally go through the community foundation, and it used to be the neighborhood center. It's generally things for like traffic signage. Those it's usually leveraging grants they get from private entities, like for example, Mutual of Omaha has a big grant where if you don't leverage from local government, you don't get it. Which is why we don't get a lot of them on the side of the river, because our government just historically doesn't give money to these. So a good example would be recently one neighborhood got in-kind support and some money, which together totaled about $800, to get a $4,000 grant from Mutual to install one of those solar panel, your speed is X type things, which, and on that street's a major pass-through street. Is that a good thing? I'd say yes. But I grant you, not everyone's going to agree. So I guess what I'm suggesting is on that, maybe some sort of, if we go through the private, if we want to contract out, if you will, the administration of it, I don't care how we do it. And maybe that's a better way to do it. Maybe it's.
I'm just thinking it takes out my personal preference for this nonprofit versus that one, because it's uncomfortable.
Sure.
You know, I did hesitate on the why, because it is a nonprofit. Not only is it a nonprofit, it's a young Christian, Young Men's Christian Association, which I don't know that city government should be investing in religious organizations. I don't know.
It's just the why now.
Oh, it's just the why now?
Yeah, it's just the why now.
Okay. Well, not that I'm an anti-Christian, let me tell you.
no.
It's not that. It's just that I'm saying, this is where I could have, I could have somebody who is, Buddhist or whatever coming to me and saying, why are you giving money to a Christian organization? My whole point is that it's uncomfortable to be put on the spot up here when it comes to private organizations or nonprofits like that. It's like you have to pick and choose, who do you like, who do you don't like, and that's not what it's about.
Right.
Again, that was one though that had us giving them that was pending approval.
It was, and that's.
So I think that should be such a huge,
And that's the only reason I voted in favor of it, because the state put that requirement on the money. But if all they wanted was to come, if they would have just come and said, well, council, let's consider supporting our organization, $10,000 a year for the next 5 years, and that requirement had not been on there, I would have never voted in favor of that, because that would make no sense to me. There are a lot of other places that would like to have that same money, and we're not doing it with Boys and Girls Club, we're not doing it with, it gets sticky for me.
I guess for me, as long as the money, you talked about maybe private donations and being administered by somebody else, I would be more than willing in favor of that than taxpayer dollars. And I don't want a line outside the mayor's door with their hands out asking for money. I mean, that's time, administrative costs. And I don't know if people donate to the city.
Well, and it's not that, it's just like there are some funds that the city has access to that are not taxpayer dollars that could be designated in that way. And that's all I'm suggesting, is that, if we're gonna do something outside of the type of things that bring economic development, then I would really like it to be taken care of through a foundation and not.
If we have, and so are we saying, we're saying that we have some funds right now that are not taxpayer funds that we need a home for? Is that what's on the table, or is this general policy?
What kind of funds would we have?
I don't see, people aren't going to donate that.
There's been this, what's driving some of this discussion, and Inky left before we got the discussion going, but they had, for years, as you know, we did first night.
Yeah.
We just read in the paper, we're not doing first night anymore, and they got sponsorships, people paid a fee to come in, there was some residual money, not a lot. Inky thinks it's her money, it's not her money, it doesn't belong to Inky, and, it's intellectual capital and the employment of the city of, it's similar to that, I guess, if you develop, whiteout while you're working for somebody else is not your invention. And so she was working in her capacity as an employee of the city during city hours, asking for money, and she thinks that now that's her money. She's told the Bluffs Arts Council the money belongs to her and she'll get the money for them. And
So,
I just don't think that's an accurate assessment of where we are.
no.
No, I don't either,
No.
But if that's the start of the conversation and we have, 10,000, 20,000, whatever, then what do we do with it? It's not taxpayer money. Then a third-party administrator, I mean, I would be okay.
Well,
Art, I think, has something to
Art,
add. Yeah, let's let Art, he's in the back there.
He's
like,
gonna come up and say you have no money.
I think we've reached a point though in our city where we've grown up enough that if we're gonna spend money on economic development, we have to think outside the box. If we wanna go from being a fantastic community, which we are, to being an absolutely fantastic community, which I believe we can be, I think we've gotta think outside that box of everything can only be given to something that buys land for the Chamber of Commerce or a project that'll bring in jobs. Because if you don't make your city a place where people want to walk their dog or do things, because those things aren't bought privately, people aren't going to move here. So, if you're a good employer, you're not going to get
But that's
more
different from
expensive
giving
jobs.
taxpayer dollars to
No, but-
charity, though. I mean, that's not gonna make our
No,
community better.
but I think wherever we get the money from, it is the public body giving the money away to an interest,
But that was all donated funds that came from private individuals and were donated to.
And that's
charity.
different.
And some of it's federal money,
Oh, was it for first night?
It was through the general operating fund, if I'm not mistaken, though I can't quote me.
I thought
I
there
know it
was
was on
something
city time, which would be
for-
general operating.
First night was a general fund activity.
Yeah.
Whether you call it donations or sponsorships, they were basically taking what they spent they were spending what they took in, and then whatever was left over, they were saying, well, that's our money for next year. Well, it's revenue to the city's general fund to be spent on cultural and recreational activity, and in the long run, we spend a whole lot more than what we took in on that. So to think that there was an amount left over exclusively for first night, I think, that came to the city and never got used in any other sort of way for recreational or cultural purposes, probably isn't a good, isn't the right approach to take to it. You could probably find a lot of other expenses associated with first night that never got charged to first night. Can you say that I took in anywhere between $35,000 and $75,000 depending upon the year, and spent somewhere between $35,000 and $75,000 on lots of buttons that ended up getting thrown away, and lots of entertainment that people didn't go to? Yeah, and you could probably say maybe after that specific spending, we had some money left over. But did we ever say this is the cost of the police and this is the cost of all the other stuff that goes with it? And did First Night really make money over the years? Probably not. So again, I'm not trying to belittle First Night.
If it made money, we'd still be doing it.
But,
Yeah.
well, doesn't it come down to whatever we do? We need a policy, because I completely understand the uncomfortability when a neighborhood or something like that comes to us for money. But I personally have that problem when business groups come to us, because other people will make the argument, you're using my taxpayer money to fund the competitor of my employer. So I think the policy we gotta have
They're
one.
gonna pay taxes at some point, and that's the difference for me.
Well, and more people will come in, will spend more for those houses, and you'll have higher quality jobs, and they'll pay more too.
I
So
don't think we're gonna get
I mean,
I think the policy ought to apply to everything.
We had that opportunity given to us as a city 20 years ago, and we let it evolve away from us.
what opportunity?
99D and 99F created a nonprofit with the gaming enterprises where it required an operator's license and a nonprofit's license. And the law is Iowa law is very specific that the money that goes through the nonprofits should be spent on tourism, economic development, historical purposes, and cultural and recreational activities that come into that city. And to make it so that the city just didn't control that on its own and be subject to questions, let this independent organization do it, this Iowa West Foundation. And if it isn't working right, You've got license time coming up every year where you have the opportunity to say it's not working right, we'd like to do something differently. And millions of dollars have.
But they do contribute.
They do.
Here's a question on that.
They
But-
do, but there's certain things that we as a city should do regardless of whether they do it.
Not even that, but from a question.
Well, that's where, and that's where it gets interesting on the city's standpoint and what capacity and how do we prioritize. I said earlier, we're up against the 810 levy where we couldn't raise taxes for general operations at all. We just can't, that's the limit. And we're seeing commercial valuation go down over the next several years. When people say, is this a tax-funded thing versus some other revenue sort of thing, you know, it's really kind of unfair to say that's coming from property taxes, so you treat it differently. You have to look at our entire general fund. So should we look at additional sources of revenue to do these extra sorts of nice things and amenities? You know, I'd like to say yes to that answer, and ironically we do. I heard the speed sign, the sign on keeping the speed down. That's exactly what we're doing with the red light funds. And we're finding ways to make places and neighborhoods safer from the sense of the amenities and also from the crime prevention.
But it's also important to build it up so it's not just top-down government, but the people doing a lot of it themselves. So you've got to give them some control over asking for it and being responsible for it, and not just us saying, look what you're getting, look what you're getting.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's, again, I think that went into the community-based nonprofit. Then you say, is it still that community-based nonprofit that it was when they signed on, and if not, or should there be an alternative?
So here's my question with that, because that makes sense.
Discussion with
Will that count though? Like, that doesn't count for grants applications as far as like if they need to have city buy-in. Us saying they're getting money from iOS, would that count?
I don't know. It's in the mind of the people
Right.
giving the grants.
So that's the problem with
Because
that.
it has
That's good
to
in
be the
theory, but
people.
then you're still missing that.
It has to be
in theory,
people through their elected
There
representatives.
could be a grant to the city that passes through. I mean,
Yeah, and there's a way to make it work. I mean, we're doing it with some of these.
But I think what we're trying to do is if the mayor's office is getting calls, can you donate to this, can you donate to that? He has no policy to fall back on, and I think that's where we're at, if I'm understanding.
And yeah, it seems like we've created two separate issues, one particularly vexing, one which should be fairly simple
Yeah.
to solve. And I'd like to be able to scratch the mayor's itch, if you will.
Sure.
And I think that would be a relatively easy policy to codify, to remove that onus from the mayor, and then come back and discuss this more vexing issue here that we've opened up. Does that seem like doable, something to?
So who would take the lead on formulating a concise policy? I'm looking at you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's you.
Me or?
No, Dick.
About 25 years ago, we used to have a practice where we'd take some of the block grant money we'd get from the federal government, and we'd earmark that for these little type neighborhood projects. And it'd be a $40,000, maybe $50,000 total distribution, maybe 30, 40 different organizations. And the council would, and we had an advisory board that.
That's where I started.
Uh-oh, here comes Don.
I'm not advocating it, no, I'm just.
We've taken nothing but cuts, and, given $500 to one neighborhood group, you just don't understand the amount of administrative work we're gonna have to go through.
well, that's what he's about to say.
We have a board of 14.
He's on your side, don't worry.
Like I step out for a minute and.
And I would say there's a
4 hours hashing and rehashing.
Right, and
Yeah.
I want to be doing that.
Right.
I think-
So we need a simple
And
policy that says, no, we don't do
maybe
that.
Maybe I'll get people mad at me, but I do think on this, Omaha has a model to look at. Maybe it's not the right one, I'll grant you there.
Bring that next
Sure,
meeting. and
sure.
Then, I don't know we're in any huge rush. I can itch for another 2 weeks, but so that we get to the CIP and all these people are away from us.
Yeah.
Just-
Should have the other way around, I think.
Yeah.
We're out of time anyway.
All right, Don, are you doing the CIP discussion or?
We're looking for, I think all we
Or
would
Wendy, I don't know who's doing it.
Well, I think, we are probably behind the curve to prepare a capital improvement program for 15, 16. And, you know, we've got some changes over this year. We got a new mayor, we got a new mayoral staff. One of the things that we thought we would ask is, and I want you to think probably globally or specific project-wise, or major project or globally, what are the things on your mind that you would like to see done within the next 5 years?
Project specific?
It would have to be project specific. I mean, somebody could say, I think levee's got to be a #1 priority, and that doesn't give Greg much guidance on what project that is. It's just going to be touching the levee.
Should we not talk about the process first of how we do it and how we come up with these ideas? Because we could talk about things we like.
Well, it's really a consensus of, quite frankly, of the council of what, quite frankly, would you like to see happen in your community. I mean, the process about how to implement these projects will inevitably, depend upon a lot of things, and your administrators will do that.
Sure.
Well, I guess the genesis of the question comes from maybe your email, Mr. Mayor, which you talked about, that we're looking at redoing the process for how we put together the CIP, and we've done it one way in the past, and do we want to look at maybe different ways of putting this together, which is really a process discussion that, at least on its face, seems to have a lot of merit.
And the juxtaposition of that was, in the past, they'd get the CIP and then they'd comment on the CIP versus comment on the CIP.
Well, and that's, I guess, that's really, when you talk about process, we have a set process now. I'm not saying that it's perfect in the world, but all we're doing is asking for input before we start. So the departments that are actively programming stuff hear that. Maybe they're my guess is 95% of the stuff, there's probably consensus on.
So should they tell us their top priorities, and you want us to say yes, we agree, or?
No, I would say, what's on your mind?
That's
our question.
So we did this a couple years ago, though, right? It's similar to what we did a couple years ago. Put together our list of what we would like to see, projects.
We have one, but not that this is a perfect example, but I looked around, and this is a rather comprehensive one, perhaps too comprehensive for our purposes and size, but it lists pretty detailed by subject, what overall are we, what are the priorities within it. I'd much rather, personally, that we come up with something like this as opposed to, do you like this particular project or not? Then it's just too subjective. I have a hard time thinking, well, gosh, I like that. I'll probably like everything if you give it to me one at a time. It'd be better perhaps to have something from the get-go as to, and then we can go back and we get this project and we go, all right, let's go back to the plan and see, does it generally fit into our overall, how does it fit? It seems to me it makes it a lot easier in my own mind to figure out whether we should do it or not.
And for those of you who don't have a handout, and I'm jumping through this without reading it, but it has things like prioritization factors, risk to health, safety, environment, asset condition. In other words, I assume, do we have a piece of equipment that really is in dire needs of being replaced? Community investment and economic prosperity, level and quality of services, sustainability and conservation, funding availability, project readiness. And so it just has, for lack of a better word, a flow chart of.
And I realize that you're on a kind of a timeline here, that you've already mentioned that, we're behind the power curve. I would like more time to be able to digest this.
Yeah, I know, I apologize. I actually just found this one this morning, and so I apologize. But my main point was not that necessarily this one's perfect for us, it's probably overkill, but my point is we need some sort of framework, I think, just so when we come to a project, we can go, all right, kind of like when we look at the master plan, all right, you want to build there, let's go back to the master plan. Is that kind of what we're thinking? Is it compatible? Well, with this,
Yeah.
it would give us a roadmap so that,
You do have some under roadmap already. I mean, I can't say that our existing stuff is identical to that. I mean, what you do have is what the purpose is, what type of projects we're talking about, some general overriding goals. We probably could be a little bit more specific on maybe financial matters of when we use geo bonds and where we don't, where we use sales tax, those types of things. But then we have categorical goals that essentially the departments have created and we've pulled from various plans, like, you know, what are our goals in parks? What are our goals in sewers? What are our goals in public safety? What are our goals in redevelopment? What are our goals in street infrastructure? What are our goals in stormwater? I mean, that's all there. You know, and I will tell you, I mean, goals are easy to do, but it's pretty easy to drive truck through them when it gets down to a, you know, specific project.
this would give an example of some weighting and some other things that might, I grant you it wouldn't solve everything, and from what I found, there are lots of different ways to do it. This just seemed to have, again, is probably overkill. It seemed to have, I like to find something with a lot of things in it because it's a lot easier to X something out as irrelevant as to try to add it. So,
A couple of things we have been doing that gets into national models is we have done a good job of looking at what our fund, what's going to come from bonds, what's going to come from gaming, what's going to come from external sources. And all the department heads do a very good job of looking after the projects and the needs that are in their area. I think if there's been one thing that may have been missing over the last few years, it's if there's something that transcends a specific area, who looks at it, who advocates it, who champions for it. You know, the obvious one is in buildings. You know, a lot of people have said we need a police station. A lot of people have done some work on it. Whether we do or not, that's subject to some question. But at what point does something like that get dropped into the CIP? And the answer is it doesn't right now, under the current way of doing things.
and this would establish a policy, it would help.
Well, yeah, or this building here,
Sure.
How do we do something, or if we determine we needed an administrative building, would we do it as a city or would we do it as part of a bigger picture? That level of thinking up above where we're currently doing a CIP is where some thought needs to be given and some sort of structure either added to what we're doing existingly or blended into a bigger policy.
You said it far better. That's what I was
Yeah.
attempting to do. Thank you. You said it far more succinctly and accurately than I could convey.
So I'm clear on something here. Did you give them recently what's in the CIP as far as goals?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, I really suggest you look at what's in our current CIP for goals and kind of, rather than go to some other document and say, let's mirror, let's start with that document, modify it to our needs. Let's start with our own document.
Well, this would establish a policy so that when staff comes up with things, there's already, all right, this is what the elected government overall wants. So you've got a framework to come up with your specific proposals. So,
well, that's what we have now. We call it, that's our goal.
What is it you want?
I'd like to have us to have a policy that comes from council that as to the overall. And again, this is not necessarily the be-all, end-all, but it is an example of a policy.
But what I heard you reading to us was a way to evaluate individual projects.
Well, it'd be the policy of, okay, when you do something, the council wants you to take things in X order and rank things this way. In other words, it would be the elected government saying, giving some overall guidance, otherwise take the police station, otherwise the proposal will come all the way to us. And at that point, let's say you wanted to build one on the edge of town and we wanted it in the center. It's kind of late in the process, whereas if we've got a policy early on, let's say we feel really strongly one way or the other that it ought to be someplace, that would save you a lot of time, a lot of guesswork, plus quite frankly, keep us out of a position where we've got 2 meetings or 5 days or what have you, depending on the situation, to try to change a complete whole policy. And usually the response will be quite understandably, gosh, there isn't time. And I just don't like making policy that way on big issues.
And I understand your point about goals and that a lot of those goals do exist in the current CIP document. I noticed that when we were considering the current CIP, I compared against last year's CIP, and the only difference in the narrative at all was the inclusion of the police statement, of the police station. The rest of all the goals and the narratives were identical to what they were the year before. So that kind of suggested to me that perhaps either those were really great goals or that we were just kind of cutting and pasting.
Well, they're long-term.
Yeah, it's, I mean, when it comes to infrastructure, it takes decades to implement infrastructure change.
The biggest frustration that I have in the person that kind of puts it together is, and there is a process. I mean, the process essentially works like this. I mean, those goals and policies and stuff were approved by council at one point in time. Should they be approved every year? Sure. And that, should they be changed by you if you see that fit? Sure. I mean, no one disputes that. We sit down with Art, we talk about what we project out as far as revenues. So there's some fiscal decisions that Art and the mayor have to make as far as debt service and things of that nature. And then, we've taken and essentially did an allocation. The challenge, that's where the challenge is what are the overriding, overall big goal things that you want to accomplish? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, you will have a very difficult time figuring out how to rank Greg's sanitary sewer project, phase 13th Street, phase 6, versus a Quint.
Sure.
Versus, something else maybe for the recycling center.
Sure, but if
because they're all different things, and I think that kind of has to come from above. Is like
indeed, that's a policy, an overall policy, so that we're involved from the get-go, so that I hate being at the tail end of it, because even if I disagree on something, there's no time for us to change it. And the elected government should be involved far earlier.
You've had been in the front, you just have chosen not to.
And I would agree, we do have one, and we just don't really do anything with it, and I think that's on us, and I'm suggesting that we
you can sit here and say, do you even want to issue general obligation bonds in the future?
I think it's a good discussion to have, an overall discussion.
what do you want to do with your debt service?
Mm-hmm. Good questions.
And then, almost to a project, they come up again to get voted on individually, so
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
And some get changed, some, since I've been on the council 18 years, we've been putting Fairmount Park off for 18 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's
the real question. Hey, you're still on the list, so that's good.
The real question though is what type of resources does the Parks Department do you want to provide?
And that's, I think, an overall discussion. It's really hard. I don't know the answers to that. It's not going to be an easy discussion all around, especially cost-wise, but I think we ought to have it.
But I will speak, for most of the departments, and I think, Greg wants predictability. I mean, he's not thinking about what he's going to do in 15, 16. He's been thinking about what he's going to do in 16, 17, 17, 18. He's out there. I mean, some of the stuff takes so much time. I'm sure the fire department has got their inventory of what they're looking at. They want predictability.
I have no doubt that whoever the elected government is of the day isn't going to willy-nilly change things year to year, because that would be stupid.
Well, it depends on how you set up the policy.
But I think that people have a right to have an elected government do something stupid. So I do think that check is very important and ought to be involved earlier in the overall policy. And it seems like a lot of places have that. We have one that's much smaller, and it doesn't seem anywhere near as encompassing. And generally, we just haven't
I think it's
followed it.
It's
really
incumbent upon you then to tell us what that policy is.
Yeah. So I'm making a process argument. I'm not making a substance argument what should be in it whatsoever. I just think the process needs to be different.
So I guess coming back to my original
I didn't know that's what.
Question,
that's what
comment.
they wanted.
To address
Mayor,
something
it
Nate
is-
said,
I'm sorry.
that you have that check. The check's right in front of you. We have money in the CIP since last year to buy an engine.
Yeah.
It's gonna cost around $450,000. When it comes time to buy that engine, you're gonna get a chance to vote on it.
No,
I
but
just
I
think
wanna
that
know-
when you get into you're gonna create a procedure.
Yeah.
The most important thing is the communication that we have with the mayor on kind of the overall vision and what, he should have a vibe for what you guys have. And then the department head's communication to say, hey, I know Greg needs this. And if you look at last year's CIP, there was changes made to it. There was money that was addressed, I think even with our Quint, there was money taken out of projects that we wanted to do and added to other projects because that communication between the department heads was taking place. If you start to overload the process.
Where does elected government fit in, other than at the end? For example, if there's a strong belief that there ought to be a new fire station, let's say around the Mid-America Center, an issue that's come up a lot over the decades, I understand. And then it comes down to, fair enough, we'd have to find a way to try to find money for it and prioritize it. But if that's a strong view of the elected representatives, it's not, I don't want to just rely, I don't think I'm doing my job if I just rely on it, hope to have it come up administratively, and then I get to vote up or down on the end, and if it's not in there, it's not.
But we're here every couple of weeks, so if there's something that comes up like that, we're able to bring it up.
Oh, but I don't have an overall policy, so if I look at something and, if you ask me, should we build a fire station by the MAC, I don't know, it sounds like a great idea. Do we have money? Does it fit into an overall plan? Well, we don't have one.
Understand, Nate, that when you hear that from people, and that's probably where your constituents is maybe
Yes.
where you're hearing things
Yeah.
like that.
That's just an
when
example.
a department head realizes that the checks that had to be done to justify that fire station, he's going to be the first one, he or she will be the first one here advocating it. The problem is that sometimes the constituents ain't making good calls on good
Well,
information. It's
Sure
just,
enough, but
it's pure
they
hype.
they're in charge.
To some extent,
No,
but,
they are.
But
Not a small group.
But as
No, no,
far
no,
as the
but the
department heads
electorate is in
making a
charge of what-
decision
Well-
and saying amongst themselves, when I need a fire station, I'm sure you'll know that Art will be the first one to know and Matt when we're ready for that trigger, and that's kind of how the system works. That's what I'm just saying.
And
I
I'm saying
think it's
about
working
streaming.
great, to
No,
be honest.
Well, I understand that, but under the charter and under the rules and best practices, we're just involved too late in the process, and I don't think we're doing our job if we aren't involved but for at the end. I appreciate, I lean heavily, just speaking for myself, on the experts that we employ to give us advice, but as to our overall direction, we're elected by the people to do that. That's our job.
We're asking for what is the direction we want to take.
That's what I mean. I'm not even arguing one way or the other what the policy should be. I just think the council's got to have one.
I mean, it's like, do you want Greg to work on the levy system or not?
I think it comes down to a policy question of, look, overall, where does levies rank? I'm sure, I doubt
It's a
anyone's gonna
policy.
say it's really
Do you
low.
want him to do it? Do you want him to continue his sewer rehabilitation program? Or do you want him to emphasize storm sewer?
I think that's part of the discussion we need to have.
Are you concerned with the fire equipment?
Yeah,
I mean,
those are good
Are you
examples.
concerned with the maintenance of parks?
Good examples. And which one ranks higher? How do they go? I think it's not an easy conversation. And so,
It's not that hard either.
Well, I think we just need to figure that out. I think we need to have it.
Well, that's
Because
the
when we do it
conversation.
just project by project, I'm more likely myself to vote for everything because they all sound good and they all sound needed and you can make a good argument. But I'm thinking of myself, am I doing my job well if I'm always voting yes on projects and not thinking about, okay, what's our overall vision, what's our overall policy? I just would be more comfortable. It's kind of like when we give away money to groups. If we're going to have a policy to give away $50, we ought to have a policy if we're going to put fire stations somewhere. It's $4 million, or I'm making up a number. And I think that's got to come from the elected.
No one's disagreeing with that.
Okay.
I mean, it's, of course it's appropriate for you to set the overall objectives of the document.
Yeah.
It's appropriate for you to set the funding level and the individual projects. But, be careful what you're asking for.
Well, I understand, but I think that's what we were elected to do, and I think we have to do it.
I have a question, I assume that,
And then recognize that it's a 5-year plan, and some of us here may have less than a 5-year duration on the council or in the mayor's office, and so there isn't a lot of, I don't wanna see where we need 3 years of funding to complete a project.
No, I agree with you.
A whole new body's in saying, we're 2 years into it, we're not interested in that anymore.
I do not believe, based on precedent and idea, if, for example, if I were just new on, there's something that's been going on, it's in year 3 of 5, and I don't like the idea, well, we're in year 3 of 5, we have to finish. I don't think the people are gonna elect people are gonna do crazy things. And if they do, well, then they deserve the people they got elected. I mean, we can't protect the people from themselves. I just don't think that's proper.
Okay,
Way
so
to
I have-
look at government.
so I have a question then. This item C, I assume that's something that you asked to have on the agenda. I don't know what, okay, because I'm just wondering, like, what is the
We
goal?
wanted to get you involved more in
Okay.
the capital improvement priorities, I guess, and
Well, the real question is are we on the right track? Are there things that you
I don't know.
don't see being done that you would like to see being done? That's a simple question.
Okay.
And I think having
But you didn't ask for a policy, you're just,
No, I'm just
Want
suggesting
some
that's a
input.
way to find the answer to
Well,
those
honestly,
questions.
several of you are saying you want to see a better policy.
I-
You're the policy-making body.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We have to come up with the policy. I don't know what it is, and I'm very, very grateful to the mayor for bringing the discussion up. Maybe he's regretting it now, but
a little bit.
probably, and I wouldn't blame him. But I think it's good we're having. It's a healthy discussion, I think.
Yeah, a couple years ago, the council got very involved when the community came forward and said, we need to improve the roads in this cemetery up here.
Oh, yeah.
It was not in the CIP, but the council directed, make that a priority.
Right.
Happen.
Yeah.
So that's the way the council has historically stepped in and taken control of funding.
well, I thought a couple
And
years
I
ago
just
we
hate
did a
doing it
priority
that
list
way,
too.
because then it becomes
Didn't we
pet
do that?
project.
We did that like a year.
I don't think
Yeah.
so, though. I think that the council always has that ability. I mean, I came here with a couple of things I wanted to add today. I thought that's what we were doing.
The thing that
But if we're late in the process, how are we really
How
doing
late
our
in the
job?
process are we? They're not done with it yet, and we're
When did we
getting.
start?
No, but I mean on individual projects that come in front of us.
Well,
I mean, if
But we
the
can bring up
plans have been
anything
drawn,
anytime though, like, I mean, we can bring up anything anytime.
How will I know to
I
bring
think
up what I don't know?
I think what Lynn mentioned, though,
Well-
like when was it? Like 2 years ago, we
Yeah.
had like a planning day.
Right,
Remember?
right.
We
Yeah.
had someone in the room with us. We sat down and went
Yeah.
over. Maybe is that what we're wanting to do?
That's what
again?
that's what I was remembering, that we actually came up with our own priority list, what we would like to see.
We
and
did.
Maybe we need to do that again.
We
that
didn't
what we-
write a policy out of it though.
No, we didn't.
Fair enough. I think we can't just. I don't think it's fair to staff to just give them some of our ideas of what we think we might like. I mean, we could do that, but if we don't have a policy written down, I don't think that's fair to them. How do they go with that? How are we held accountable to that?
Sure. Well, I've been around for a while, and I just heard you say, that you don't, can't be aware of everything. I think there's something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that is
What I
so-
don't know, yeah.
That is so true. I mean,
Yes.
you could be here on the council for 40 more years. Okay? You will never tell, probably Greg Reeder, whether that sewer in 13th Street needs to be rehabilitation.
No, but I do think I'd be able to tell them, let's prioritize sewer over parks in this instance, or whatever. I think we have to do that.
But I don't think there is such a person that can know what is necessary in public works. I can't look at a fire truck and say, that pumper needs to
The
go.
overall policy, though, is
I know.
our job. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's our job.
But just keep that in mind when you're talking about it.
Oh, I agree. It's not going to be an easy conversation. Though it's hard enough talking about the process, about the
Right,
conversation.
so I guess I'm trying to understand, if you put this policy into place,
Yeah.
and you're saying it's the council's job to make those decisions, and I understand what you're saying, so what happens next year if there's a new council? And, because you keep saying that's our job, well, isn't that their job? And
Yes,
then
can't
wouldn't it be
bind.
incumbent on them to tear the whole thing apart and start over?
Well, they could do that because you can't bind a future government, but the fact, we have to rely on the people electing people to do something reasonable. And if we can't rely on that and just govern by experts, no matter who they are, that's just not the way we do things.
Well,
we're done.
at least while we're thinking about crafting a new policy and the pros and cons of doing that, I'd like to return briefly to Lynn's idea of maybe at least to make sure that this process keeps rolling now in a timely fashion for us to get together and have that public discussion and put it out there, put that discussion out there so that the taxpayers can hear us having that discussion. And then that way they can beat up or pat us on the back, however they think appropriate. And that would seem like at least the way to keep this moving in the near term.
Well, frankly, that's what this was intended to be, and we asked that we do it in a setting where we could sit down, but one of the options was to do it here. When Wendy came back and said they want to do it in the council meeting, I looked there and said there isn't enough time to do it in the council meeting, but we'll do what they want to do.
And I was frankly a little bit confused as to the original email and then the invitations to rack and stack projects later on. I wasn't sure what the intent of this was.
We're kind of two different things, but
It's a big subject.
it is a big subject. And
Yeah.
I think you gotta have the process first so that you know when and how you're gonna talk about specific stuff.
Well, maybe coming up, we have a rather short agenda that we can allocate more study session time to it.
Of course, we're running out, I don't know what your timeline is. I'm willing to do that. I honestly, personally thought it was gonna be more than what we could handle in the study session. But
Right.
I think that's right.
everybody, or the feedback we got through Jody was everybody wanted to do it here, so we're trying to accommodate you however you wanna be accommodated.
Well, I think there's some confusion. I thought we were just gonna, I was looking at how it is now and what did I think needed to, that wasn't on there that maybe should be considered being added.
Yeah.
And I thought we were gonna discuss those items. I didn't know
That was the intent.
that we were gonna come here and
Oh,
if
that's
I
not
didn't
how
know
I-
this was gonna be on, what we were gonna be talking about, I would have agreed, maybe we shouldn't have done it here and we should have done it at a separate public
Yeah.
meeting. But I didn't know. I really just thought
I
I would
honestly,
do it.
I honestly read it as, and I give
guess we had
kudos to
different
the mayor, the
interpretations.
process of wanting us to be more in the process, particularly earlier on. So I thought, okay, so he's asking us, what our policy is, what do we kind of want to see overall, what are the priorities? I think we got to come up with that first before we decide I want this building or that building.
What is the timeline, though, Matt?
I don't know, that's Don.
Don, what is the timeline?
He's the one who writes it.
Well, I'm sure Greg
Yesterday.
is starting to look at engineering contracts for next construction site.
For us, it works around construction season. We have to start in March, end of March with construction, which means we have to have things designed through the winter, which means we have to hire consultants in the fall.
Well, we're almost to fall. I mean, if there's a short agenda in September,
I just don't know.
I don't know. I mean, how many hours do we need?
We didn't do it that way last time. I think it's.
So we
gonna-
had separate.
Yeah, I
It's
think
gonna
we're
be a separate
Yeah.
meeting.
Because had I known this was gonna be, something we were gonna discuss,
My apologies.
I would have said, no, we can't do that. It is a very in-depth. It's gonna take a long time.
Yeah.
And I had the same amount of confusion going into this discussion, so
I didn't know what we were,
Maybe
yeah, I
you
wasn't
can
sure.
overcome your theory, too. Sorry.
Well, that's why I suggested you kind of start with the goals that are in the CIP and kind of evolve from there, because to start completely from scratch, I don't know how you're gonna get that accomplished.
I doubt it'll really change much, to be frank. I just think it'll.
I don't know what's
There for us
I don't know
is
what's
like
missing, what needs to be added. I mean, I don't.
No.
It looked.
Well,
I mean, for my.
That we want wholesale change.
That's
Let's just write down what we do.
good feedback.
first.
That's what we wanted to hear.
But let me think more.
And I guess, from my perspective, what I kind of
Just think we
envision
should give them
is,
written guidance
it's a 5-year
overall.
plan, maybe we got something scheduled for year 5 that you wanna elevate up in priority
I
and
see.
get done today and push something back
Okay.
to year 5, and given the complication of determining where or when we need to replace a pump station or that type of stuff, cause as Don says, no one up here probably has the expertise to know what the life
Right.
expectancy is of.
Yeah, because I couldn't
But
rank
even
it.
higher up, you know, where do
Couldn't
we
even figure
rank
out what
those
was missing.
priorities over time? I think that's important for them to have that understanding. I don't want to decide when we replace a pump, but you know, over time, how we prioritize things overall, I think.
Well, I can tell you, all right, what are we getting for sales tax? 9 million?
What do we weigh?
Okay.
Sales tax.
We've been bonding 8. Our general fund, gaming funds are dwindling, you know. Well, half of it's sales tax. It's already going to Greg.
I'm sorry?
It's already going to Public Works. It's gonna go in streets and sewers.
Sure.
So,
And that's where your
You have
considerable expertise in this subject area is going to be very helpful. I wouldn't want us, certainly myself, to write a policy in a vacuum because it's going to be awful.
you know, and
You know?
there are certain rules on geo bonding, right? For example, can we build a fire station? I think not.
Probably not an essential corporate purpose.
It's a distinction as to whether it's essential purpose or general
Yeah.
purpose.
We can buy equipment, but I don't think we can build it.
Well, no, that would be subject to a reverse referendum. But, you know, the interesting thing where, and I shouldn't jump in and extend this, tell me to shut up. But Nate's, you know, you made the statement of half the money's gonna go to sewers because it's sales tax. What I hear Nate sort of saying is, well, if at some point we don't wanna build sewers anymore.
It's a ridiculous example, but yes.
But I wanna do buildings.
Yeah.
Maybe it's politically, you know, maybe the point comes when you start to say, let's look at the whole overall policy. You're looking at it from a higher perspective.
I'm way up in
Yeah.
space looking down at it,
Yeah.
yes.
And so at what point do you have that discussion? So I would tend to agree with Greg for 15, 16, you probably.
It's too late, I'd agree with you there.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you for 15, 16, but I'm just saying we ought to have the
But
discussion.
eventually you have to think about those things and say, where does the authority rest?
And in my own mind, I don't know the answer, and I'd love to hear my colleagues, and over time, I think we need to talk it through and figure it out.
Well, some of that is in the document already, but.
Yes.
or Maybe it could be better articulated, as I start.
Yeah, kind of how I read the document now is as just a statement of goals without a prioritization. So to me, what we say in the military is how everything becomes a #1 red hot priority without prioritization.
You know, we have 7 rules with it.
Yeah.
Art just said, no, we shouldn't be spending it for, you know, things that don't have a life of 10 years.
We have to own
I
the
think there's
overall
probably
direction.
pretty much
At what
agreement.
level though?
I could sit here and say, well,
So you
you
were
know,
not suggesting that I decide whether or not.
if you look at our costs in
Absolutely
government,
not, absolutely not.
you can either put
Absolutely
it in a lane mile cost or in a
I'm just
geographic.
not
Yep.
explaining myself
Okay.
very well. I'm just talking about the
So,
overall.
Should we be using our
Leverage
you know,
very high.
GeoBond money to actually, since we're
Them
going
knowing
into
that,
debt, actually
then when they come to
get
a
tax
plan-
base back?
Except
How
should they?
important is that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a way to
Here's
fund
the thing.
some of these
Really, are you
items?
kidding?
What the
No, I'm-
fire
You're
department
not.
does is a geographic
In that.
basis.
There's certain things.
What the
that
police
we-
department does is a geographic basis.
don't
What the
know.
parks department does is a
They're gonna
geographic
just give us
basis.
some bucks.
Where, you know,
So you raise a good
so
point, that's
should
why
we
I'd like
be
to have a
using
discussion here.
GeoBond money, which I don't
Myself on
think
your-
we are,
Well, it's like how we
for paving, for example, the street in front of mine?
home get it all done.
As opposed to
and
yours.
then get screwed out of.
I know Art
See, that's
is
where this
chomping
starts
at the
to
bit here.
irritate me.
Again, back
I
to
like
those
that.
assumptions, Don correctly mentioned that will go out usually about 8 million, $7.5 to $8 million on general obligation bonds. That's been a given. Why is it a given? Because that's, gives us a debt service levy based on that principal and interest to afford that. In the past few years, as interest rates have gone down, we haven't gone out and borrowed more, saying we can keep the debt service levy at the same number, because there was the direction to not let the overall tax rate go up. We, in a sense, said we're going to pay for higher benefit costs with less interest costs and less construction. There could have been a group of people who would have said, let's raise taxes and still build these things. That wasn't our direction, but I see that as a possibility that could have come from a council or from a mayor. In essence, we did what we felt you were directing us to. Don't raise taxes, get the job done, provide the same level of services we have. But, you know, another very vivid example of how what you say could set policy. We could take the example of right now should be a great time to borrow because interest rates are low, we can build at these costs? Are we willing to risk a tax increase to say, in the long run, you won't spend as much money and the time is right to do that now? Another example of discussions under this policy umbrella that should be part of our long-range thinking, and we as the department heads are looking after the areas where it directly affects the operational issues that we have and the service issues that we have, but on a broader perspective, we need some direction like that.
What he said.
Well, I was always a big advocate of debt as a banker, and I honestly think the cost of debt is cheaper than the inflation cost of construction, and we probably should have.
And maybe we should.
I myself in that thought process, I think.
You know, and I think that's a discussion, and there are times, and that's, if there's the heat to be taken for that, that's our job to take it.
Maybe we all meet with our 5-year goals with you guys, and you bounce your goals off us, we all kind of contemplate them, we come back a week later, do it again.
I think
Work in that direction
I like
instead
that.
of.
Speaking for myself, I need to learn a lot more about how that works from an overall view. I don't want to know where this pump goes here, what kind of pump. I'm not going to know that.
I like that.
I don't need to
though.
know
I like,
that.
Yeah, I like
All the
that.
department heads, because that's basically what we're doing.
Yeah, I like that.
internally.
Yeah.
I'm going, Don's throwing whatever out on a piece of paper, and I'm saying, hey, I know that I got an aerial that's 20 years from the day we bought it, we gotta look at replacing it, we have an engine, all these different things. If we brought those to you on like a 5-year picture, it may be easier than you guys getting too far into the weeds.
Yeah.
You can kind of look at it, throw your ideas out there, we can all kind of contemplate it together, then you're on the front end, and then we sit down and write the CIP, and then you guys get a chance to vote on it.
Your challenge.
What he said too.
Your challenge will be, there's not a soul in this room that can overwhelm you with needs.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah.
But see, and that becomes our tough job to rank them and then say no.
Well, because there's only so much money.
Yeah, exactly.
But I welcome that, that input and that back and
I like
forth
that.
Absolutely.
opportunity. And at the same time, you're looking for us, I guess, to provide not direction at the 500-foot level or the 50,000-foot level, but hopefully at about maybe the 20,000-foot level. So you're just looking for some, excuse the military expressions, a little vector, a little direction from us on it. And if we make sure that Art is in the room with his visor and pointy pencil so that he can talk about the particular financial implications of doing one thing versus another, that just makes that conversation all the more valuable. So thank you for bringing clarity to that process.
And that, hopefully that gets us more understanding early on, so we ask less stupid questions later, and I'm talking about
Well,
myself.
and it would be fairly easy to give a range of capital investment, annual capital investment that we have to work with, and so that then gives you
Like that.
Yeah.
framework. as-
Yeah.
Starting point.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, a good example is Larry in the parks. Like you mentioned, what was it? Fairmont got pushed back forever. Current, all of a sudden, something came up where we knew, like, right now, bike trails are huge. That's getting more priority. I mean, so I think some things might sit down and we might think, oh, you know what, we've heard a lot about this. Something that Justin needs to work on might be something we've all heard complaints of that maybe they haven't. And we'd say, okay, how about this is year 3 instead of year 2? Or, I mean, maybe
This is
something.
an exercise Don does every year with the
Yeah.
Leadership Council Bluffs class, and it's not as easy as it sounds.
I'm sure it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
I'm already
Then we have a
I'm
better
already
idea,
sure
too,
if
if
people
people
are
are
mad at
asking
me.
us,
I'm probably
yeah.
mad at myself.
Mhm.
But
Then it helps us know, though. Then at least we do know what your goals are. If someone asks us, we can say, well, we've met with them. This is the reasoning for why they're not doing it till then. I mean, it
it's
gives us a little
relatively
bit of
easier to say
background.
no. Like, for example, the Fairmont Park, you get asked, sometimes I get, well, why isn't it there? I don't know, the other things are greater priority, well, why?
Yeah, and then
I
we would know.
can't say, speaking for myself, and that's just not a good place to be.
Well, and I can tell you, since I was there, the first time we put it off was Hannafin Park.
Sure.
They.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
That does make sense.
That was because Iowa West
Right.
had it as a priority, and they were gonna put money in it, and so we took
It's the
the
front
money we
door.
were gonna put in Fairmont. and
Well, I remember it
leveraged
got
it
put
with
up
that.
one year when the marketplace was going in, because the road had to be done. 24th had to be done, because I was on the planning commission at that time, it got bumped for that. So, there's always those like to have to have, and you're not gonna not pave a road if it means bringing in, tax base, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agree.
I like that idea, though, of setting.
All right, well,
Goodness.
we'll,
I've kept everybody all night long.
we'll figure out
My
where we're gonna go from
apologies.
there, and I'll send you emails, so.
Don't hit me.
Okay.
I'm just gonna email you the things that I thought should.
So we have a quick break between this and the next meeting?
How many minutes?
I apologize, that's how I read it.
At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, we take pride in our community, volunteering our time to helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We are Council Bluffs people operating a Council Bluffs bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Hometown banking, the way it used to be.